things before we start. And forgive me, it's a bit of a prolonged preamble, but we are a hybrid meeting and we do have people online as well. The meeting is taking place, as I said, at Shepton Mallet, and we have members of the Planning Committee, officers, public speakers and members of the public physically present in the chamber. We also have members of the public watching the meeting on Teams. Cameras within the council chamber allow us to film the meeting for viewers on Teams and also to record the meeting. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they're not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concerns, please let us know now. Members who have brought their own devices with them should ensure that their cameras are switched off, and very importantly, their device, microphone and speakers are muted for the duration of the meeting. Otherwise, this causes feedback on the council sound system. Public speakers contributing to the meeting virtually should switch their cameras off and put their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak by the chair. It's not permitted for any members of the public viewing by Teams or within the council chamber to contribute to the meeting at any time. Should any member of the planning committee wish to speak, please raise your hand and catch the attention of myself, the legal advisor, the lead officers. When members in the chamber speak, remember to switch on your desk microphone so that all those in attendance and viewing can hear you. Please do not use the chat function within Teams for anything. All contributions must be made verbally. Please can you all ensure that your mobile phones are set to silent? Fine, thank you very much indeed. Right, before we start the meeting, I would like to ask for a vice chair. As many of you know, we sadly lost Councillor Robbins with us not that long ago, a couple of months, and we still are without a vice chair until after the full council meeting at the end of the month. So for this meeting, I would like to propose Adam Boyden as vice chair, sorry, you're welcome to it. And sorry, Councillor Lovell?
Happy to second.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Adam, would you like, sorry, any? Right, we'll now move on to the agenda. And first of all, apologies for absence and also notification of substitutes. Helen?
Thank you, Chair. So we've had two apologies today from Councillors Philip Ham and Helen Kay, and we have Councillor Michael Dunk, who is subbing for Councillor Kay.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll then move on. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll now move then on to minutes of the previous meeting. These have been circulated ahead of this meeting. And are there any additional amendments to anything the clerk would have received? Or people content for me to sign them as an accurate record? Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Cameron, and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lovell. Right, on to declarations of interest. Do we have any other on the matters being considered on the agenda today? No? Okay. I will just make a statement. As with applications in my own village, I will make the following statement. For the record, I'd like to note that I live in the village related to the first application. My property is some distance from the application site at the opposite end of the village. I am a parish councillor and currently the parish council chair. I have absented myself from parish response and parish discussions on this application, and accordingly I come to this meeting with a clear and open mind. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to public question time. And I believe we have a public question, or that has materialised now.
No, it hasn't. So there's no public questions today.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. What I have done is added something to the agenda. As most of you will know, we had a decision on Selwood Garden, Frome. I think it's 1,700 properties over a period of time, and it's obviously material to our housing supply. And so I've asked Andre Sestini, who is the Senior Planning Policy Officer, to give us an update, so we're all aware of the situation. I'm very conscious that people have interpreted the 1,700 houses in Selwood in different ways, and we just need to have total clarity on this. So over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just make a few brief points about the 5-year housing supply. I know the main issue is really with the very large application approved in Frome. How does that count into the overall 5-year supply position? So the current position was published last July. So I'm going to caveat what I say by we are due to have another update shortly. So we're still calculating the figures in terms of what the current exact position is, but for certain reasons it won't change significantly. I think just in terms of the way that gather that 5-year supply is a target set by government in terms of the number of houses we should find over the next 5 years, equated against what they call deliverable dwellings. And the deliverable bit is really a sum of the sites under construction, those with permission, and a range of schemes at an earlier stage. I think the definition in the annex is that there needs to be a realistic prospect that housing will start on a site in the next 5 years. So in terms of the Selwood Garden Village development, it's an outline for 1,700 dwellings. We would definitely count a proportion of that as part of the 5-year supply. Question is, what's realistic? So of that, we know that the Secretary of State sent a number of conditions, particularly around what's a reasonable number of where the trigger points for the new infrastructure is. Quite a lot of requirements around master planning in terms of the whole site. That said, when we come to update the 5-year supply, we would normally be adding in sort of 300 to 400 dwellings as part of what could be delivered from the 5 years from 2026. And 400 dwellings is a particular trigger point in terms of the road infrastructure being available on the A36. So that's a sensible, proportionate amount of that to be counted to the supply. Obviously, we have other permissions that we've granted. And the problem with these numbers is they don't stay the same. They get updated every year. And it's a balance. Clearly, we have also delivered from our existing supply from last year. A certain proportion will have been completed. They come out of the supply. New permissions go in. So it's a rolling picture every 5 years. The other important point to make is that there's a link between that housing target and our past delivery. That's the housing delivery test element. So our performance going back over 3 years is tested against what the targets were then. And if we're below that level, then there is an additional amount added to our supply target. So effectively, we have a 6-year supply because we delivered less than 80% of the last government numbers. At the moment, the housing delivery test hasn't been updated by government. They're promising to do that at some point during the year. But we are actually talking about a 6-year supply when we look at the figures. So that, I mean, compared with July last year, clearly, I'd expect we will have the larger schemes. I think last time we recorded just over 2,000 dwellings in larger sites, the major developments. That's probably going to go up to say 2,500. So I expect there will be an improvement in our 5-year supply picture, but you can't unfortunately count all the 1,700 dwellings because it'd be difficult to. They're not all going to get built within the next 5 years. I think the other, apart from the targets, it's when we come to decisions and particularly appeals, it's whilst the level of how 5-year supply is significant, it's also hugely helpful if the council can point towards schemes which are going to deliver over a long time scale. So I think whilst we can count a proportion of that supply, it's also useful for the council to be able to say, look, there are sites coming forward which will deliver there are sites which are going to deliver over a 15-year period. So quite often you'll see in appeals, they'll say, well, you can't meet the 5-year supply and there isn't really any alternatives. Where's the supply coming from? So I think now that we've had the Secretary of State's decision, it's also helpful in that context to state that there will be a long-term scheme at Frome which is going to deliver potentially 100 to 150 houses a year over quite a long period. So that might well be an important factor where you're looking with maybe we've found really small schemes where the inspector's saying anything will help. Whereas if you've got a longer term strategic scheme which can be argued to be part of our supply position. So it's the figure is important, but it's also the wider context. Should also say, last point, we are clearly looking at what point we calculate 5-year supply on a county-wide basis. At the moment, we do it separately for districts, and that's probably appropriate because we don't have a strategic set of proposals in the local plan to present a 5-year supply position against. So clearly, we've got a scoping consultation coming in the summer and then detailed proposals next year. And at that point, we'll start to see where are we going to build houses across Somerset. It starts to become more legitimate to have a county-wide picture of a 5-year supply. At the moment, we're still doing on a district basis, and that helps some parts of Somerset over others at the moment. But we'll keep that under review as we go forward. And once we start to have a shape of where housing is going to take place, it becomes more legitimate to have to set the 5-year supply in a county-wide context.
Thank you, Andre. That's a helpful update. Any questions from members of the committee? I think you've been quite full in your explanation. That was great. Thank you. And thank you for finding time in the middle of your busy day. Simon, do you wish to add anything to that?
I think, Chair, if it's okay, we've got obviously the appeals report at the end of the agenda, so maybe I'll just say something at that point in terms of the various conditions, but probably nothing more to add to Andre's overview of the 5-year land supply impact.
Okay, that's helpful. So just for clarity, we will have another bite of the cherry if people have any questions at the end when we look at our appeals. Right, shall we now move on to item 5? This is the application, which I think many of our audience have come this afternoon to listen to. It's an outline permission with all matters reserved except for access for the development of up to 60 dwellings, land for community use, public open space and associated landscaping access, infrastructure, engineering works. So again, just to remind members of the committee, this is not just outline, it's an outline with a number of proposals, which some of them will be covered off by 106 and some of them are just indicative policies at this stage. I think, everyone's looking in agreement. So we're looking for, first of all, the case officer, Amelia, to give us a presentation, and then we'll move on to the public speakers and other people who wish to speak on this. So first of all, Amelia.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So as introduced, this is a site on land to the south of Roughmore Lane in Westbury Sub-Mendip. The application is before members as the proposal is for a major development and the parish council are objecting, which is contrary to the officer's recommendation of approval. So in respect of the main considerations, the presentation will follow the same format of the report. So both Part 1 and Part 2 of the Mendip Local Plan contain policies that are relevant to the application. There are also other relevant documents such as the Council's placemaking principles, the Mendip Design and Amenity of New Development SPD and the MPPF. So since the publication of the report, I'm providing an update. This is a drafting error more than anything, that these conditions should have been included within the report, but they were missed. So the Environment Agency in their most recent comment provided conditions, recommended conditions rather, if consent were to be granted. So the first of these is that prior to commencement, a foul drainage scheme shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA, and then should be implemented. And also there's details there regarding what level of details needed within the scheme. The other EA recommended condition sets out that no occupation should occur until the approved foul drainage scheme has been formally adopted by a statutory undertaker, or until the LPA has received written confirmation of the proposed adoption process for the PTP. And then also there was a condition that was needed, which is referred to in the report, but missed off the actual conditions, to secure that any subsequent reserve matters application is informed by the submitted sustainability statement. In respect of the pre-commencement conditions, these have been reviewed by the agent and they're in agreement to these being imposed. So moving on to the application site. So the site is to the south of Roughmore Lane and to the southwest of the village centre of Westbury Sub-Mendip. To the west of the site lies a playing field with a small sort of play park facility. To the north, residential properties. To the south, countryside. And to the east, agricultural buildings, the village church and other residential properties. We now move on to photos. So this is a combination of street view and my own photos. I just thought as well I should probably clarify that this did come to a members briefing back in November. So if this is feeling a little bit familiar, that's why. So the red arrow indicates approximately the application site. So this is the view as you approach the site from the east. And where those two cars are parked, that's the existing mortar pits, which is how it's known locally, informal parking area. As you travel along the road, you approach the junction of Roughmore Lane with Stoke Road. The existing junction where that sort of black car is emerging, where the lady with the dogs is crossing, it's got considerably restricted visibility, and we'll come on to more details regarding this junction as we discuss the proposals. And just to confirm, the application site is the field towards the left edge of the photo. And then this is sort of as you pan round to face the application site. So it's this grass field. And then as you travel along Roughmore Lane, this is the view, again with the red arrow indicating the application site. And then this is as you've gone along Roughmore Lane and then look back towards the way you came. Okay, and we now move on to my photos. I tried to stitch some of them together because I felt it gave a better sort of view. So this is a view from the north west corner of the site. I'm just checking my notes are right. And you can see the sort of recreation field and play area there to the right, sort of separated by that chain link fencing. This is a view along the northern boundary facing towards the west from within the site. So those are the properties that are along Roughmore Lane. And then this is a view from that north boundary towards the south and west. And then a view from within the site towards the east. You can see the church. And then from the sort of middle of the site, looking back towards the north. There is a public right-of-way next to the agricultural buildings. So this is as you approach the site from the public right-of-way. Okay, so just sort of discussing how the scheme has developed. So there's been many rounds of pre-app in respect of this proposal. The site layout that's shown on the slide was submitted, and the key issues raised by the officer were regarding heritage concerns in respect of proximity of housing to the listed buildings to the east, concern regarding encroachment to the east and south, and stating that all residential development to be kept within the policy WM1 allocation, concerns regarding the quantum of development and also the limited landscaping opportunities that could be delivered with this layout. Following this, the application was then amended and presented to Quality Review Panel in September 2024. Key changes made were the removal of residential properties from the east section of the site, increasing that separation distance from the listed buildings, creation of a central green space, removal of the conversion options in respect of the agricultural buildings, and citing the community land provision close to the site access as hashed out in red on that plan. QRP reviewed the proposal and made a series of key recommendations, such as provision of a design code and development brief, avoidance of car-dominated street scenes, illustrative master plan to be submitted with outline application, agreement to the relocation of the vehicular access, and that continued discussions of highways should take place to explore potential crossing points or a speed limit change. Encouraging more use of SUDs rather than just the attenuation basin, increase in tree planting, encourage cycle walking route to the church and from the village centre through the site into the recreation ground, removal of the footpath through the ecological corridor to the north, and also to secure a strategy for the community land. So as a result of that, this was the proposed site plan layout that was submitted. Key amendments made since the QRP response were the removal of the footpath from the landscape buffer to the north. So the footpath hasn't disappeared, it's just been moved outside of that buffer. Submission of a design principles document, additional street planting, swales and rain garden, softened appearance of the attenuation basin, and additional access provided to the recreation ground. So considering the principle of development, as I'm sure we all know, that the east area of Somerset currently cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, with the current figure calculated at 2.84 years. So as set out in paragraph 11 of the NPPF, the tilted balance is therefore engaged in applying the presumption in favour of granting planning permission for sustainable development, unless there is a demonstrable and significant harm that would arise from doing so and would be outweighed by any public benefit. Policy CP1 of Part 1 of the local plan sets out that Westbury Sub-Mendip is classified as a primary village due to the amenities that are on offer within the settlement. Additionally, Policy CP2 sets out that allocations of land for housing outside of development limits will be made through the site allocations process. So notwithstanding the indicative area for the attenuation basin, Policy WM1 of Part 2 of the local plan allocates the land depicted on the slide for a minimum of 40 houses, providing that the 8 criteria of the policy can be met. So in terms of allocated sites, so the application site is allocated for housing by the Mendip local plan, which is adopted by the council, so it's our plan. As the site has been allocated through the local plan making process, there has been an assessment undertaken by planning policy regarding the suitability of the site for residential purposes. In addition to this, the NPPF requires planning policy to identify opportunities for villages to grow and thrive. Therefore, the principle of the land being used for residential purpose has therefore already been accepted, with the caveats that any scheme complies with the criteria of the allocation as set out, which we'll now move on to. So the first of the points made under the policy allocation is that the allocation is made for a minimum of 40 dwellings, including policy compliant affordable housing. So the application seeks outline consent for up to 60 dwellings. And given that the policy seeks for a minimum of 40, the 5-year housing land supply position of the council and the indicative densities, which I'll come on to later on in the presentation, and that other matters are considered to be acceptable, it's therefore considered to be compliant in respect of the number of houses proposed. The policy DP11 sets out that 30% of affordable housing should be provided, and the submitted planning statement confirms 30% is to be provided, and this would be secured by section 106. So that's 30% on site. The affordable housing officer has also reviewed this and has accepted this proposed provision. Point 2 of the allocation requires for any scheme to be supported that site layout, building height and soft landscaping should be appropriate to minimise the visual impact of the development in this rural location. As the application is for outline consent, matters relating to site layout, building height, soft landscaping, materials and style would be further detailed when a subsequent reserved matters application is submitted. It is noted, however, that an illustrative master plan design principles document, along with design principles and parameters within the submitted design and access statement, have been provided. And it is proposed that a condition would be imposed to require any future reserved matters to be informed by this submitted design principles document. These documents are considered further within the presentation. In respect of the illustrative density of dwellings, the proposal results in an average of 30 dwellings per hectare. This is considered to be a low density for a residential development and is in line with the recommended densities for rural areas as set out by policy CP2. We then move on to point 3 of the allocation, which states that new development should reflect the local materials and style. As previously mentioned, this is an outline application where appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are reserved matters. However, the submitted DPD, which is Design Principles document, sets out character areas, which details overarching design principles in terms of building types and heights. And these are considered to be in keeping with the surrounding area. And again, as previously mentioned, it's proposed to impose a condition to ensure that future reserved matter applications are informed by the DPD. These are some of the sketches from the submitted DPD, providing sort of illustrative depictions of what the properties could look like. Moving on to point 4 of the policy WM1, stating the site should be designed to safeguard the amenity of neighbouring residential properties. So the indicative site plan demonstrates that the number of dwellings sought consent for can be delivered with suitable separation distances from the closest existing properties by way of the landscaping and ecological planting and the buffers that are proposed. Potential matters relating to overlooking, if required, could be addressed at reserved matter stage through conditions such as ensuring obscure glazing or removing PD rights in respect to first floor windows. Environmental health have been consulted and have raised no objection and have recommended a condition to secure a construction environment management plan, which would seek to safeguard the amenities of residents during the construction phase of the development. A lighting plan is proposed to be secured by condition for ecological reasons. Therefore, concerns regarding light and potential light spill pollution would be addressed as kind of a byproduct of that condition. Point 6 of the criteria states that opportunities should be taken to maintain or enhance biodiversity, and particular consideration will be needed of the impact on designated sites. 0.13 hectares of accessible bat habitat should be provided. So the application site is within the nutrient catchment area and is also within a bat consultation zone. A shadow HRA has been submitted in respect of the potential significant effect that the proposal may have on these sites, And this concludes that suitable mitigation can be secured, and this would negate a likely significant effect. Natural England have been consulted on the application and the shadow HRA, and they consider that the proposed mitigation to be acceptable, and therefore SES have endorsed the shadow HRA. In respect of biodiversity net gain, the proposal seeks to deliver this on site and well in excess of the required 10% increase. So the proposal would seek to provide an additional 14.17% of habitat units and an additional 127.73% hedgerow units. Ecology impacts of the proposal, including more detail regarding the phosphate mitigation strategy, are provided further within the presentation. In respect of the 0.13 hectare of accessible bat habitat, the illustrative master plan indicates that this is to be delivered by way of the additional hedgerow planting to the north of the site, and the landscape buffers to be provided along the northern and western boundaries. It's proposed that this is secured by Section 106 planning obligation. Point 6 of the allocation requires further investigation of traffic impacts and a safe access onto the A37 to be required. The policy also sets out that safe pedestrian links should be provided to enable access on foot to the village core. So, considering vehicular access, the existing vehicular access from Roughmore Lane to Stoke Road has a very restricted visibility. The proposal seeks to close up the existing junction and to provide a rear-line stretch of Roughmore Lane to allow for a better access point onto Stoke Road. The proposed development is then proposed to be accessed from this rear-lined part of the road. The policy sets out that further investigation will be required in terms of traffic impacts and safe access, and that safe pedestrian links should be provided. Investigations have taken place by the applicant team alongside the small improvements team of the Highways Authority. Due to the geometry of the A371, lack of visibility and available footway width, and the need to retain adequate carriageway width around bends, no suitable location has been identified for the provision of a control crossing, tactile paving, or refuge island. However, the applicant has proposed to fund and implement a traffic regulation order to reduce the speed limit along the A371 from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. It is considered that this will make the existing informal crossing point safer than it currently is, and the TRO can be secured by Section 106 planning obligations. Considering the other highway impacts that could arise from the proposal, the Highways Authority have reviewed the application, raising no objection, and have recommended conditions, and this is detailed further within the presentation. So it is understood that there has been a long-standing local demand for an improved crossing and pedestrian links throughout the village centre. So as previously mentioned, lengthy discussions and investigations have taken place, and due to the geometry of the road, a formal crossing cannot be provided, nor can the pavement width be increased. So the informal crossing point is as shown in these street view images. So as well as there being pavement along the south side of Stoke Road from the application site, a connection to the public right-of-way is proposed, and this reaches Stoke Road next to the informal crossing point. So it's sort of on that corner. You can just about see the Wayfinder poster. I don't know if my cursor is showing on the screen. Yes, it is. Just about. So it's considered that the reduction of the speed limit to 20 miles an hour would improve safety for pedestrians using the informal crossing and for those walking along the pavement of Stoke Road. Moving on to the next point of the allocation. So this sets out that the impact on nearby listed buildings in the conservation area will need to be carefully considered. So the application site is partly within, but mostly outside of, the Westbury Stud Mendip Conservation Area, and is in proximity to a number of listed buildings as highlighted in pink on the plan. Historic England and the Council's Conservation Officer have been consulted on the application. Initially, Historic England raised concerns relating to the proposed relationship between the development and the church, and have encouraged that through any master plan or reserve matters application, for the site to identify solutions that better respond to the significance of the church as derived from its setting. The Conservation Area Officer has raised no objection to the proposal, setting out that the benefit of the delivery of housing, including affordable housing, outweighs the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets, and that during the reserve matter stage of the application, a successful scheme in terms of design and materiality could be created. The proposals have been assessed as having a less than substantial harm due to the proposed development, not resulting in an impact on the physical form or historic fabric of the heritage assets, and that their special architectural and historic interest remains legible and appreciable, with the effect limited to those aspects of significance that derive from the setting and therefore does not meet the threshold of substantial harm as defined in the NPPF. In response to the comments raised by Historic England, the master plan has been updated to demonstrate the intervisibility from the central green open space of the proposal with the church, and that views can be retained. And I'll show this on the next slide. But considering that proposal is for outline consent and that there are indicative details to demonstrate that the setting of the heritage assets can be treated in a sympathetic manner, along with the public benefit that would arise from the proposal, it's considered that in this respect it is acceptable. So as you can see, this is the slide. So it's been updated to demonstrate how views of the church from the central green space could be retained for a proposed scale of this development. Proposed development of this scale, rather. Sorry, got my words jumbled. So point 8 of the policy allocation states that up to 0.1 hectare of land will be made available for the delivery of a community facility. No further contributions towards community facilities would be sought from the site. So the submitted master plan has indicated that this is to be provided within the northeast corner of the application site as shaded in blue. This is considered to be an acceptable location due to the proximity to the main access of the application site. It's therefore proposed that this would be secured by Section 106 agreement. So considering affordable housing, as previously discussed, the proposal includes the delivery of 30% on-site affordable housing. So for a scheme of 60 dwellings, this would result in 18 affordable homes. The Affordable Housing Officer has reviewed the proposal, confirming that the scheme is policy compliant, and has recommended a suggested mix of affordable housing to be 80% social rent and 20% shared ownership, based on policy and local housing need. It has also been recommended that a local letting plan is to be agreed with the affordable housing provider to assist with the allocation of the proposed rented properties through Home Finder Somerset as part of the Section 106 obligation that would be used to secure the on-site delivery. In respect of education provision, Somerset Education Services have been consulted on the application, with financial contributions have been requested totally based on 60 dwellings. This would total approximately 213,000 in respect of local early years and SEN provision. The NHS have also been consulted and have requested approximately £57,000 in respect of local healthcare services. Again, it's proposed that these financial obligations are to be secured by the Section 106 legal agreement. So policy DP14 of the local plan sets out that residential developments should provide an appropriate mix of dwelling types and sizes, reflecting identified local need in Mendip. So whilst the application is for outline consent with details regarding the housing reserved at this stage, the submitted illustrative master plan and planning statement sets out that the proposal could provide a range of house types and sizes, including detached, semi-detached and terrace properties, therefore delivering a housing mix that could meet a variety of needs. Policy DP16 requires all new residential developments provide new open space at a standard of 2.4 hectare per additional 1,000 people. So whilst, again, this is outline application, the illustrative master plan demonstrates that a 60 dwelling scheme could be delivered along with the provision of approximately 0.8 hectares of public open space, including a play area and a community green. The plan shows that the community green could be delivered adjacent to the site access and therefore easily accessible for the wider community. So given that the provision of 0.8 hectare would be the requirement for approximately 333 additional people, this equates to an average of 5.5 people per dwelling when considering a 60 dwelling scheme. So it's considered that this level of provision is acceptable for a proposal of 60 dwellings. In addition to the on-site delivery, the indicative site plan also depicts pedestrian links to the adjacent recreational field and play area. The design principles document, which is proposed to be conditioned, refers to the interconnectivity of the site with this adjacent recreational facility. It's also perhaps worth mentioning, and I'll come on to this later, that there's a number of public rights of way as well, which then lead to the wider countryside. So considering highway safety and active travel, as previously set out, the scheme seeks to stop up the existing junction with the creation of a new stretch of road and access onto Stoke Road. The Highway Authority considered that the proposed junction alterations are a significant improvement on the existing arrangement. The proposed alterations will significantly improve the visibility, and whilst the visibility displays proposed to serve the new junction are below the requirement for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, the applicant has agreed to a Section 106 to fund and apply for a traffic regulation order to reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. Whilst the application is for outline consent, consideration must be given as to whether the indicative site plan demonstrates that a suitable parking and cycle storage provision can be provided. The illustrative master plan demonstrates that this could be provided for the level of housing proposed by way of off-street parking areas and garages. In respect to cycle storage, the sustainability statement and the transport assessment, sets out that cycle storage details would come forward at a later stage, and this would likely be provided within garden areas. In respect of other conditions relating to highways, it's been recommended by the Highway Authority to include conditions to secure provision of surface water disposal, construction of access in accordance with submitted details, retention of visibility displays for the new access, and submission and approval of a construction management plan prior to commencement. In respect of the submitted full travel plan, this has also been reviewed, and no revisions have been requested. It's proposed to secure the travel plan measures along with a safeguarding, monitoring and implementation fee by Section 106 legal obligation. In addition to this, and in line with other residential schemes in the area, it's proposed to secure a financial contribution towards the delivery of the Strawberry Line by Section 106 obligation. And for a scheme of 60 dwellings, this would total approximately £43,500. Additionally, the illustrative master plan depicts a mown path connection to the public right-of-way to the south-east of the application site. The Council's Rights of Way officer has been consulted on the application and has raised no objection, with a recommendation to secure this footpath link by Section 106 obligation. In respect of the Strawberry Line, I thought it was perhaps worth including this detail. So the yellow star is the application site. So as you can see, the purple lines are the existing public rights of way, with the red arrows sort of broadly indicating the site of the Strawberry Line. So as can be seen from this, there is a public right of way that runs to the south, which then connects to where the Strawberry Line is. This can also be accessed from Moor Lane, as shown in the Google Street image, through the Kissing Gate, I think it is. So moving on to visual amenity and landscape, the application site is in proximity to the Mendip Hills National Landscape, with the closest part of the boundary of the designation approximately 145 metres away. A landscape and visual impact assessment, otherwise known as an LVIA, has been submitted. Concerns were originally raised by the Mendip Hills National Landscape Officer regarding the radius of the zones of theoretical visibility within this document, as these only extended to 1 kilometre. This has now been addressed with ZTVs extending to a 5-kilometre radius. The National Landscape Officer notes that there is an absence of photo montages, and that whilst the submitted LVIA states that the Year 1 and Year 15 level of effect would be minor adverse, with the magnitude of change reducing from minor to minor negligible, that this can only be indicative at this stage. However, it's considered by the Mendip Hills officer that this can be provided at reserve matter stage and used at the detailed design stage to inform future proposals. An external lighting strategy condition is currently proposed due to bat sensitivities, and this therefore is considered to alleviate concerns that have been raised regarding potential impact of lighting on the designated landscape. The Mendip Hills officer also requested a condition to ensure that there is a maximum height of 2 stories and that acceptable dwelling types are used. As this is detailed within the submitted and to be secured design principles document, this is considered to be addressed. Furthermore, a request was made by the Mendip Hills officer for a landscaping and ecology management plan. So given that potential ecology issues are addressed by relevant conditions recommended by the ecologist, and that condition is already also proposed to secure a hard and soft landscaping scheme, it's considered that the need for a LEMP, a landscape and ecology management plan, has been addressed by these other conditions that are proposed to be imposed. In respect of other potential impact on landscape, the council's landscape officer originally objected to the scheme in respect of the detail of the submitted LVIA and a request for further information to inform the DPD. Further landscape advice was sought from an external consultant following the submission of further information. The further comments resulted in an increase of tree planting proposed, including street trees and legacy trees, along with the inclusion of detail regarding a low stone walling entrance to reflect the character of the settlement and a resiting of the play space to the south of the site. Within the tree planting strategy, which is within the DPD, which is to be secured by condition, it sets out that one category C tree is to be removed. However, considering the submitted replanting strategy and that only one low category tree is proposed to be removed, this is being considered as acceptable. Additionally, the submitted arboricultural impact assessment sets out the methodology to be used to ensure that current trees and hedgerows are protected. It is proposed to impose a condition to ensure that relevant measures are put in place to ensure that the existing vegetation is protected during the construction phase of the development. So again, whilst as previously stated, this is for an outline consent and therefore details relating to the character of the layout and visual appearance of the proposal would be assessed further at reserved matters stage. As previously mentioned, the proposal is considered to be of an acceptable density of housing for this location and that the overarching principles of the DPD are considered to be in keeping with the surrounding area. Somerset Waste Partnership have raised concerns regarding the layout and accessibility to some of the dwellings proposed in respect of proximity to the highway. However, such matters in respect of layout and which estate roads are to be adopted would be considered at reserved matter stage. So moving on to heritage impact, as previously highlighted, the application site is in a proximity to a number of listed buildings and partly within, but mostly outside of the conservation area. No objection has been raised by either Historic England or the Conservation Officer, and consideration has been given to the intervisibility of the application site and the church, which is a focal point of the village. So it's considered that in line with the MPPF that less than substantial harm would result from the proposed scheme. Paragraph 215 of the MPPF sets out that when determining planning applications, where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, that this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. It's considered that in respect of this application, the less than substantial harm is outweighed by the public benefit of the scheme, namely additional housing, including affordable housing. In respect of the details of the proposal, such as materials and form of the dwellings, this is a reserved matter. However, relevant conditions are proposed to ensure that the DPD is adhered to. The document sets out that the nature of the character areas within the site, including detail of building types, massing and building heights. Additionally, a land use parameter plan has also been submitted, and this too can be secured by condition. In respect of the amenities of existing residents, there is a ribbon of residential properties along Roughmore Lane to the north, facing the application site. The closest of these lies approximately 12 metres from the boundary of the site, with Roughmore Lane separating the properties from the application site. There are also other residential properties to the east, the closest being Courthouse Farm, approximately 75 metres from the site boundary. So whilst the application is for outline consent, it is considered that the indicative master plan demonstrates that suitable distances can be provided from existing dwellings. In respect of the properties to the north, it is also proposed for an 8-metre wide ecological buffer to separate the proposed dwellings from the boundary. As such, due to these distances, it is considered that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact in respect of overshadowing or over-dominance of existing properties. In respect of potential for overlooking, whilst the distances are likely to mitigate for this, If required, conditions can also be imposed to secure obscure glazing and removal of permitted development rights in terms of additional windows, where appropriate, at reserved matters stage. Considering the amenities of future residents of the proposed dwellings, the illustrative master plan indicates that the proposed level of housing could be provided along with suitable separation distances and amenity space for each dwelling. As previously mentioned, Environmental Health have recommended a KEMP is secured and that a standard land contamination condition is also used to ensure that the amenities of future and existing residents are protected. So moving on to ecology, the application site is within Zone C of the North Somerset and Mendip Bat SAC and within the nutrient catchment area for phosphates. The shadow HRA has been submitted and reviewed in respect of the SAC and phosphates catchment area, and this has been accepted by SCS and Natural England as suitable mitigation could be secured. The proposed phosphate mitigation strategy seeks to utilise a combination of fallowing adjacent agricultural land and the use of a packaged treatment plant to ensure nutrient neutrality. The use of a PTP has been proposed as if a main sewer connection were to be used. This would require the fallowing of 61 hectares of existing cereals land, compared to the proposed fallowing of approximately 1.3 hectares. Initial objections from the Environment Agency were received due to concerns regarding permits and the use of a PTP rather than the main sewer. However, as the PTP is to deliver an ecological benefit, it's considered that this could be achieved in respect of obtaining those relevant permits from the EA. As such, the objection was lifted by the EA and relevant conditions have been recommended, and those are the ones that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. Considering other ecological impacts, the proposal seeks to deliver biodiversity net gain on site through the landscaping strategy that is proposed. There is also a proposed 8-metre wide ecology buffer to the north and west boundaries to provide the accessible bat habitat required by the allocation policy, and this is proposed to be secured by Section 106 obligation. In respect of the conditions recommended by SES, this includes a sensitive lighting scheme, a construction environment management plan for biodiversity, sensitive vegetation clearance measures, badger and hedgehog sensitive construction measures, confirmation that badger mitigation and enhancement measures are implemented, and the protection of trees and hedgerows during works. So moving on to surface water, foul drainage and flood risk. The application site lies in flood zone 1. I think there is a typo in the report that says outside of flood zone 1. It's in flood zone 1, which is the lowest flood zone, because you've got 1, 2 and 3, so it's in 1. Whilst the Environment Agency has previously objected as set out, this relates to the phosphate mitigation strategy rather than other drainage impacts, and the EA have recommended conditions to secure the foul drainage. In respect of the proposed use of the PTP, Wessex Water have not formally responded to the consultation request. However, correspondence between Wessex Water and the developer has been submitted to the officer. The position of Wessex Water is that a private PTP can be adopted, providing this meets their required standards. As the application is for outline consent, such matters will be addressed at detailed design stage. If the scenario were to arise that Wessex Water were unable to adopt the PTP, such as the final design of the PTP not meeting Wessex Water requirements, a new appointment and variation, also known as an NAV, could be used to adopt the PTP. Considering the recommended condition from the EA to ensure that the PTP meets adoptable standards, it's considered that this matter has been addressed appropriately. Oh, sorry, I clicked off it. Where is it? Sorry, I can't see it on my screen anymore. Apologies, I will just find where I was. Okay. Considering surface water management, the scheme proposes the creation of an attenuation basin to the south, proposed to discharge to a culvert further to the south. Within the scheme, a variety of sustainable urban drainage systems, otherwise known as SUDs, features are proposed to be incorporated into the scheme, such as conveyance swales along the southern and western boundaries, Small-scale rain garden features within the central square and adjacent to the realigned highway, water butts, rainwater harvesting systems, permeable paving, filter drains, silt traps and sump gullies. Initial comments from the Internal Drainage Board and Lead Local Flood Authority requested further information in respect of onward connectivity of the drainage system and details of the available capacity within the waterways. Following the provision of the detail, the IDB and LLFA were happy to move to recommending conditions to secure details of the surface water drainage scheme, including the responsibility and maintenance of the system and implementation of the scheme prior to the commencement of development, except for highway works. So considering sustainability, if consent were to be granted, the council's standard water usage condition for new dwellings would be imposed. The application is accompanied by a sustainability statement, which details the measures that could be incorporated into the scheme, such as the use of reused, recycled and local materials where possible, reduction of construction waste, provision of energy infrastructure and minimising operation energy use. Whilst the strategy is at a high level stage due to the application being for outline consent, a condition could be used to secure the measures detailed and for further information to be provided for subsequent phases of the scheme. Additionally, the illustrative master plan indicates where footpaths are to be provided, and the scheme also includes the securing of a change in speed limit for the main road to allow for safer pedestrian access to the amenities of the village. Furthermore, as part of the Section 106, financial contribution is to be sought towards the future delivery of the Strawberry Line, which is a transport-free route from Shepton Mallet to Clevedon, which routes through Westbury Sub-Mendip and in cycle and walking distance of the application site. So this is a summary of the planning obligations that are proposed. So 30% affordable housing provision on site, financing and implementation of a traffic regulation order to reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour, securing the travel plan measures and a sum for safeguarding, implementation and monitoring, the link to the public right-of-way, financial contributions to early years and SEND provision, financial contribution towards NHS Somerset and Royal United Hospitals Bath, the phosphate mitigation strategy, which is currently proposed as fallowing of land and a PTP, or otherwise agreed strategy providing mitigation to the same value, BNG implementation, maintenance and monitoring, Strawberry Line financial contribution, provision of 0.1 hectares of community land, and provision of 0.13 hectares of accessible bat habitat. And this is summarised again in this table with the figures. So the application, therefore, is recommended for approval, given the compliance with the relevant policies and 5-year housing land supply position. Appropriate planning conditions and Section 106 obligations can be used to secure relevant mitigation. I think I've just duplicated a sign. Sorry. So yeah, that is the recommendation, and that the authority be delegated to the head of planning in consultation with the chair or vice chair of the planning committee where appropriate, to make minor amendments and refinements to the wording of conditions, agree minor variations to the heads of terms and final drafting of the Section 106, add, amend or remove conditions where necessary, and then, yes, sorry, I've got myself in a bit of a muddle because I think I've duplicated some of the slides. So I'll just end by summarising this last slide. So yes, lack of 5-year housing land supply. So therefore the tilted balance is engaged in favour of granting permission unless adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits of the scheme. Potential harm to the conservation area and Mendip Hills National Landscape have been identified. However, there's no objections from relevant consultees and conditions can be used to secure sufficient mitigation. The scheme is considered to be compliant with the relevant local plan and MPPF policies. The scheme provides benefits of additional housing, including affordable housing, highway improvements and infrastructure contributions. Additionally, the site is allocated for residential development within our local plan, and therefore the officer's recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 agreement and the conditions as set out. Thank you.
Thank you. Do take a drink after that. I think it's a water at least. Well done. We now have a number of speakers, and I have a list in front of me which has a slight amendment, so do please tell me if I've got it right. But the first one will be Mr. Langdon, a local resident, followed by Mr. Maguire, again a local resident. Mrs. Fletcher, and then it'd be Mr. Gamble, and finally Fletcher Robinson from CPRE. We then have Nicholas Brown speaking in support, the Parish Council Vice Chair speaking, and then the divisional member, Councillor Shearer. And then finally, the senior planning agent from Lichfields will be completing. Once those statements have been made, the officers will have an opportunity to add anything which you feel needs clarifying from what you've heard, and then the committee will then go further and ask further questions and come to a solution or a resolution. Right, so first of all, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And Mr. Langdon, do you want to kick off? Do join us. You will have 3 minutes and it will be timed by the clerk. Thank you. When you're ready to start.
Councillors, this application represents the most significant development proposal in the history of Westbury Sub Mendip. As a community, we've been expected to accept poor process and threadbare assessments. There are 3 critical areas which justify refusal. Highways and pedestrian safety. The officer's report suggests all options for a safe pedestrian crossing have been considered. This is not the case. The approach from highways has been extremely arrogant, an attitude of you are wrong, you know nothing, we are right, and nothing can be done about pedestrian safety. Yet very few options to solve the issue have been considered. Safe pedestrian access across the A371 is a top priority for the village. The Parish Council commissioned a report setting out best practices to how those options should be examined, ignored by all. We were told to wait for the application to be submitted. When it was submitted, we pushed for all options to be considered again. The highways and planners then told us our discussions on pedestrian safety were informal and not part of the formal application process. Unacceptable, and our objections are recorded. Contrary to what the officer report says, the lack of sight lines to support a safe pedestrian crossing, there is a solution that the PC have presented. Safe pedestrian crossing solutions have not been properly examined. Policy WM1 is not satisfied, and this lack of full assessment alone justifies refusal. Landscape impact. The Council Landscape Officer commented in February and April 25 and made it clear that the scale of the development would bring harmful impact and that key issues were not addressed. Many of those issues are still not addressed. The original and the revised landscape impact assessment does not meet the standards as required by Somerset Council's own guidelines. Mendip Hills National Landscape say the landscape report cannot be relied upon, and we should avoid taking conclusions at face value. And development could be at odds with the existing character of the village, would be highly conspicuous and unacceptably harmful, even from some distance away. We ask that you listen to the consultative evidence, reject the existing threadbare assessment. The landscape impact of this proposal is harmful and it should be refused on this basis. Sewage. The Environment Agency objected to this application on 3 occasions. The Somerset planning team then wrote to the EA saying the development would not be viable if the EA did not withdraw its objection. How is it acceptable for the LPA to lobby a statutory consultee on behalf of an applicant on grounds of viability? There have been no changes to the proposal, yet under pressure the EA now roll over. However, their concerns remain the same. Development of this size should be connected to the main sewage treatment plant. This should be sufficient grounds for members to recommend refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Langdon. Our second speaker this afternoon is Mr. McGuire.
Good afternoon. New housing is needed, but Sorry, good afternoon. New housing is needed, but a single hit of 60 houses, a 17.5% increase in the size of the village is too much. Pays little attention to the priorities of villages and our local infrastructure and is wholly unacceptable. The villagers have strongly stated that their main objection to this application is the lack of regard to pedestrian safety and safe access to the core of the village. Safe access to the primary school for our children, safe access to the village shop, church, pub and village hall for all residents, including the elderly, who may be slow and unsteady crossing roads to enjoy a sustainable village life. Somerset Council recognise the need for this in WM1. The application does not provide that safe crossing or meet the requirements of WM1. In the week after Easter, a speeding car ploughed into the village shop garden wall, causing thousands of pounds worth of damage. It was a matter of luck that no one was killed. 3 days earlier, in the same place, a collision occurred involving two cars, apparently trying to avoid a large tractor and trailer. A village speed watch session last week recorded between the hours of 3 and 4 in the afternoon, 436 vehicles passing through the village. One vehicle every 7 seconds, little time for children or the elderly to cross the main road. This will only get worse. Residents of Westbury will face the added danger of increased traffic in the village from this excessively large development for the village, as well as traffic from the recently approved developments in nearby Wells, Heybridge, Cheddar, whose new residents will also be using the A371 and adding to the traffic flows. We have tried in the past to help the applicant get it right. We commissioned and paid for and provided them and Somerset Highways with a traffic survey report which looked at the pedestrian safety issues and at realistic options for making a safe crossing. We presented a draft possible proposal for a controlled crossing at the most desired crossing point of the A371 by the shop and close to the school entrance. We looked at ways to overcome sightline issues, but the applicant has failed to investigate these possibilities properly and thoroughly, and Highways appear to have given this lack of action their blessing. Highways say the applicant is unable to meet sightline requirements for a crossing when they know that they haven't explored all the options. Highways knew when they agreed that with a 30-mile-an-hour limit that the entrance to Roughmore Lane didn't meet sightline requirements, but they allowed it to go ahead anyway. The proposed 20-minute limit on its own does not give pedestrians the required sightline distance at the preferred crossing point, which residents will still have to use in the absence of a safe controlled crossing. Increased use of the multi-user Strawberry Line pathway would reduce some traffic, but this application does not include proper multi-user access to the Strawberry Line from the development. There is no safe crossing, there are too many houses. I urge you to send this poor application back so that these and many other points can be properly addressed in meaningful consultation with residents.
Thank you, Mr Maguire. Mrs Fletcher.
Sorry, I'm a bit slow.
Three minutes when you're ready.
Right. Yeah. Many years ago, I lived in Malvern in Worcestershire, and the view from the ridge there is one of the most iconic views in England. However, at a certain point, instead of your eye sweeping across the Severn Valley to Breedon Hill and the Cotswolds, it got stuck on a particular housing development which had never been designed for the fact that it would be looked down on from the hill, harming the vista forever. The outline plans for 60 houses in Westbury Sub-Mendip risks making the same mistake. The development has hard edge, it is quite rectangular, and it would be highly conspicuous. The attenuation pond is outside the area, and it will become a visible solid block when looked at from various parts of the AONB. Obviously, those of us who live in the village value our fabulous view greatly. But the view from Deerleap and along the ridge is not just our view. The National Landscapes Visitor Counter records 36,000 people a year leave the car park at Deerleap to walk along that ridge. Many more stay inside the car park and picnic area and enjoy the view, and many more travel the very many footpaths around that ridge looking down from other places. It is beloved by thousands. It is a place where people bring their loved ones' ashes to be scattered when they die, a place where those no longer able to walk come far to enjoy the stupendous view. During lockdown, I came across the police checking number plates as people were still travelling considerable distances to visit the ridge, risking fines. Its unusual and special nature and part of the important national landscape must be considered an important part of the decision planning. A recent decision to refuse a barn on the edge of the village, which went to appeal and was rejected by the inspector, reference /E3335/W/24/3338787. The decision to reject was held by the inspector, who specifically considered the fact that, and this is only one of several possible quotes I could have used, the proposal would also be inconsistent with the provisions of the National Policy Framework, December 23, which requires great weight should be given to conserving the landscape and scenic beauty of national landscapes. I do understand the need for housing, but this proposal for 60 houses is not appropriate for this place, as the damage to the view could not be undone at a later stage. A more sensitive solution with smaller number of houses could help preserve the view for posterity.
Thank you. Mr. Gamble.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to object to this application for 60 houses, specifically on the grounds of foul drainage and surface water management. Starting with the foul drainage, if a development of this significant size cannot connect to the existing main sewage system, then it should not be considered acceptable. The Environment Agency recognised this. They objected to this application not once, not twice, but 3 times, a point glossed over in the Planning Officer's report. Their position was consistent. A development of this scale should be connected to the main sewage works, not reliant on a packaged treatment plant. Despite no meaningful change in the proposal, the Environment Agency later withdrew their objection in December 2025. In that same letter, again stating, connection to a public sewer is the preferred option in the hierarchy of connections used for planning and building control purposes. The lack of transparency, omission of available detail, and multiple requests to the Environment Agency to review their decision raises serious questions about whether a statutory consultee has been placed under pressure to enable a development that would otherwise be deemed unacceptable. We're told that upgrades to the village main sewage works may happen by 2030, but this is not confirmed. So why is the local planning authority being asked to accept an inferior temporary solution now, instead of requiring the correct infrastructure from the outset? A packaged treatment plant might be suitable for a few isolated homes, but not for a development of 60. It requires ongoing chemical dosing, maintenance, and long-term management, with currently no clear accountability. There is also no robust plan for system failure, and treated effluent is proposed to discharge into the same channel as surface water. Importantly, the site sits higher than the existing sewage works, meaning a gravity-fed connection is entirely feasible. This may require investment, but that is exactly what planning policy is meant to secure. Turning to surface water, the proposed attenuation basin sits outside the development boundary, seemingly to maximise housing numbers. This is not reasonable and constitutes, in my view, overdevelopment from the original 40. Essential infrastructure should be contained within the site. The drainage strategy relies heavily on this basin to manage extreme rainfall events, yet such events are becoming more frequent. We have already seen the impacts locally. The proposal does not fully follow the SUDS hierarchy and risks exporting drainage problems elsewhere. Even the applicant's own advisors highlight the need for additional measures such as swales, permeable paving and rainwater systems, etc. Yet these are not meaningfully detailed. In conclusion, this proposal is an overdevelopment, relies on a substandard sewage solution where a better one is available for an appropriate number of houses, raises serious concerns about the process and transparency, and shifts environmental risks onto residents and the wider area, and therefore should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Mr. Brown.
No, Mr. Fletcher. Fletcher Robinson, sorry.
Oh, my apologies, yes. Apologies, Fletcher. Yes, Mr. Robinson, representing the CPRE.
Oh, God, sorry. Nearly went, sorry. CPRE Somerset's concern is that this 50% overscale block of development adjacent to the national landscape and the conservation area intrudes too far into key landscape and heritage views. Rather than building on the site of the derelict farm buildings and on a smaller percentage of the green field, as advised by the council at the pre-app stage, the applicant has opted to push much further out. The recently provided 5 kilometre ZTV diagram fully confirms our concerns. Landscape. In our view, the landscape value has not been properly assessed. The applicant's LVIA claims that the site has no value. With respect, that's nonsense. The National Landscape team have confirmed that the site is an integral part of the setting of the national landscape. In fact, the site could easily qualify under the Landscape Institute's Technical Guidance Note 0221 as a valued landscape. This guidance specifically says that landscapes providing a setting to adjacent national landscapes can be valued landscapes. This isn't acknowledged in the LVIA nor in the officer's report. The site could also qualify under other valued landscape criteria, including scenic quality and conservation interests. Heritage. The Landscape Institute's guidance for LVIA preparation says that information that will contribute to understanding value should include information on adjacent heritage assets, such as, in this case, the Grade 2 style listed church and the conservation area. It wasn't included. That omission shows that the LVIA has not been prepared to the Landscape Institute's GLIVIA 3 standards. Furthermore, Historic England specifically advised in its 1802-25 response that the development needs to be pulled back in line with the farm buildings to avoid the Grade 2 style listed church being visually confined and its connection to the countryside being cut. If that specific objection were to be respected, and please note that it isn't referred to in the officer's report, it would cut the built development area by about a third, which would be far less harmful. The officer's report also hasn't quantified the level of less than substantial harm on a scale of 1 to 10, nor mentioned the statutory duty to have special regard for the preservation of the settings of listed buildings. Somerset Council a few weeks ago agreed to quash an Area South decision for those very reasons. Is the case officer aware of that? In conclusion, the quantum is too big for this sensitive site. It needs to be pulled back in line with the farm buildings, as Historic England suggests. Members can democratically choose to give more weight to this Historic England objection than the case officer has done and vote to refuse.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. We now have Nicholas Brown. My apologies. The mix up.
Thank you. This development will be the only area of Westbury with a drainage system designed to protect the environmentally sensitive moors and levels Ramsar site. Permeable surfaces and soft landscaping will slow the flow of rainwater runoff onto the moors. Trees and hedges have been included to help retain rainwater within the site, promote transpiration and minimise runoff. The attenuation pond with the leaky bund to trap and/or dissolve nutrients and pollutants will retain runoff from necessary hard surfaces like paths, roads and roofs. The packaged sewage system provides a modern distributed model for recycling human waste and dirty water. This takes pressure off the overloaded single point of entry into the moors and levels landscape of the current sewage system. This outdated system, an outfall for all of the recycled dirty water from Easton and Westbury, is in danger of being a mass contributor to human nutrient pollution of the fragile wetland landscape. In the 1950s and early 1960s, Westbury was classed as an expansion village and had about 145 houses. At this time, 50 homes of social housing were added to the west of the village. With this and other development, the village grew by an average of 5.3 houses a year to about 330 properties in 1990. In the last 35 years, about 30 new properties have been built, but only 9 have been added in the last 16 years. Draycott, another primary village, has built in excess of 90 homes more than Westbury since 1960. With its community shop, church, school and pub, Westbury has not been expanding to fulfil its role as a primary village. These homes will allow Westbury to play its part in the development of a modern, economically vibrant Somerset. Only about a dozen affordable properties, all privately owned or rented, have been added since the middle of the 1960s. Much of the 1950s and 60s social housing is no longer classed as affordable. The affordable element of this application will start to provide more housing within the village for vital key and land-based workers. Families will grow up next to the playing field in a small rural community with many opportunities for exercise, walking and active travel, allowing children to attend a friendly, ambitious school, providing a more congenial way of life than that of a larger, new estate on the outskirts of Bridgewater or Taunton. Finally, this development will provide 60 homes and a community for local workers and those who are going to shape the economic future of Somerset at projects like Agratas and Hinkley Point C. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We now move on to Councillor Colwell from Westbury Sub Mendip Parish Council.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Parish Council knows the land south of Roughmore Lane has been allocated for housing for many years. We accept the need for more housing, both to attract younger families into our community and to offer older residents the opportunity to downsize. However, this application fails on many levels to meet Somerset Council's own planning policy requirements, and therefore the Parish Council oppose this plan. You will have heard detailed representations from other members of the community, but I would like to draw your attention to the following points. From the start, the Parish Council notified all parties to the application that pedestrian safety was the top priority for the village, going so far as to commission a professional report which offered a number of road safety options, all of which have been ignored. The current footpath access along the A371 is so narrow that it is impossible for an adult with a child to pass a pedestrian walking in the opposite direction without someone stepping into the carriageway. In addition, the current crossing point has been described by the Highways Department as unsafe and, I quote, informal. WM1 requires any new development at this site to provide safe pedestrian links to the village core. Not only does this application fail to meet the requirement, but the informal pedestrian crossing point is recognised as being dangerous. The proposal that a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit and more signage will improve pedestrian safety seems optimistic at best. The Environment Agency consistently objected to the application on the grounds that the site could and should connect to the existing sewage treatment works rather than the proposed packaged treatment plant with all its associated risks. At the 11th hour, their objection was withdrawn and the Parish Council do not believe an adequate reason for this change of decision has been given. The design principles set out in the outline application demonstrate an almost total lack of understanding and respect for the village and its character. A rectangular suburban layout will be imposed on an historic rural village located between two iconic, visible and sensitive landscapes. And yet policy WM1 states that the development needs to minimise the visual impact of the development in this rural location. This application is a 50% increase on the minimum 40 houses originally suggested for the site and can only be achieved by extending the southern boundary and squeezing more houses onto the site, resulting in significant overdevelopment in a sensitive location. The Parish Council has consistently asked all parties to this application to work in partnership with the village community, but to no avail. It isn't too late to make the changes necessary to achieve an outcome which could be rewarding for both the applicants and welcomed by the majority of the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colwell. And now Councillor Shearer, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My job here is to endorse the views of the residents and the Parish Council. I've listened to them over a number of months. I think you've heard them today. They do make very reasoned arguments with lots of fulsome facts. They are not doing the not in my backyard. I think what has been very clear and what I've heard, and I hope you've heard too, is that they do accept that housing has to be here. They want it, in fact. They do know they want to do that. It's important to them. They do have concerns, however, about a number of things. You've heard them all. The bulk of the development and the impact that would have on the landscape from our national landscape, road safety, traffic, the foul drains, and to a lesser extent, but to an extent, the surface water drainage. All very important points. I've also heard, and you've heard, that they have opened their arms, if you like, to bring the developers in and to hear what and to work to co-produce a solution, and have felt unheard. They felt unheard at various parts of the process, and so I'm so pleased so many of them are here today, so that you'll see the strength of feeling, but also that very moderate, very determined, and very well thought through requirements and requests to actually have their ideas heard and work with them to get better solutions. For myself, that the point 6 about, as I recall when I first heard about this, of course we could have land development, here for development, that patch of land, but it was dependent upon having a safe way of crossing from one place. That I have tried crossing that road. I know there are people who would actually drive to the village shop because it's safer than trying to cross the road, a matter of a few hundred yards. So it is an incredibly unsafe an unsafe way to get across. And yes, develop the village, but of course it's hard to cross the road. So I think it's really important. And like a lot of people, I wonder how effective a mere 20-mile-an-hour unenforceable speed limit might be. I don't know if there'll be any physical barriers to inform that. I don't know, but it feels light in mitigation. Similarly, great to have money for the Strawberry Line, great to find different ways of moving, but there isn't really any clear multi-user path. If somebody with mobility issues or wants to go by bike, you're going across fields. It's just, there's an attempt, but it doesn't seem to be quite joined up enough for me. So I guess what I'd be asking you to do, committee members, when you're considering this, is to really remember everything that you've heard, both sides, but remember everything you've heard, and think when you're making a decision, are you assured that the mitigations that have come in are good enough to mitigate the things that these people are actually concerned about? So I think that's pretty much all I want to say on that one. But please, we're here to hear them. They've given as much out as they can. Please do listen to them and consider what they're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. And finally, we have Zoe Mason, who is the Senior Planner with Lichfields, the planning agent.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. I'm Zoe Mason from Lichfields, the planning agent on behalf of the applicant, the Commissioners for England. The site comprises land allocated for residential development of 40 homes in policy WM1 of the adopted Mendip local plan. As explained in your officer's report, Mendip has a lack of housing land supply with only 2.84 years supply. And in accordance with the government's requirement to make the most efficient use of land, this outline application provides up to 60 dwellings, including 30% affordable housing, of a suitable mix to meet local need. All details except access are to be decided at reserve matters. We have been working with council officers and local stakeholders since 2021 to evolve the proposals in full accordance with allocation policy WM1, undertaking 3 rounds of pre-application requests, 2 public consultations, along with meeting with Somerset's Quality Review Panel. In January 2025, an outline application was submitted for 60 high-quality homes, accompanied by a design principles document to secure sensitive and appropriate design features for any resulting reserved matters application, including details of sub-features which will be determined at that stage. Whilst this does not fix the whole detail of the scheme, it seeks to ensure that subsequent reserved matters will be reflective of principles decided by this committee today. The application provides substantial soft landscaping features to integrate the development with its setting through the provision of a tree planting strategy and protection of habitat and landscape buffers. The identified land offset for nutrients will also be planted and managed as agreed with Natural England in order to enhance the area's ecological value. This is in addition to the provision of on-site biodiversity net gain. This development will also support broader infrastructure, committing to the application for a traffic regulation order for the reduction in speed limit along the A371, the implementation of traffic calming measures, contributions to medical and education facilities, provision of financial support to the Strawberry Line, and provision of a safer access to Roughmore Lane for both people and cars. Your office's report outlines that there are no technical objections from consultees, with all matters having been resolved through the application process. The commissioners have worked extensively with consultees to ensure that the site will operate sustainably whilst protecting local designations, including ensuring that there will be provision of a secondary visual impact assessment at reserved matters, assessing the detailed design of the scheme. Overall, the planning application is in accordance with allocation policy WM1 and other policies of the local plan. This planning permission should be granted without delay, and we hope to receive your support today. Thank you to the Chair and the councillors for your time.
Thank you, well timed. Right, we now move on to the discussion with the committee, but first of all, the officers have an opportunity to add anything they wish to the comments being made by members of the public.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have got a bit of a list. Number one is about highways, but I will pass over to Emma once I've gone through my list, if that's okay. A number of points were made, weren't they, regarding the LVIA that's been submitted. So the objection by Mendip Hills National Landscape has been lifted because whilst the photo montages haven't been provided at this stage and there is considered to be not enough of an understanding of how the LVIA has fed into the design of the proposal, as it is outlined, things such as layout and scale and things like that are only indicative at this stage, and a further more detailed LVIA can be provided at reserved matter stage. In respect of the phosphate mitigation, so the Environment Agency objection was lifted after there was an additional explanation of the phosphate mitigation strategy. Ultimately, it was a lack of understanding on the behalf of the EA regarding the need for this packaged treatment plant. So it wasn't that additional information was provided in terms of changing the scheme, it was just that there was further clarity given. And we had a roundtable discussion with the Environment Agency as well to really explain, spoon feed, for want of a better term, why this was happening in terms of the packaged treatment plant. So once they felt that they could fully understand why the mains sewer connection wasn't being sought, that's why they then felt comfortable to remove the objection and move to the recommendation of the conditions that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. So the PTP, it's not a temporary solution, it's part of the phosphate mitigation strategy to allow for these allow for a viable phosphate mitigation strategy, because the alternative would be the fallowing of 61 hectares of cereals land, whereas at the moment it's, I think, 1 point something hectares, I can't remember exactly, because of the use of that packaged treatment plant. There was also comments made regarding the attenuation basin being outside of the outside of the allocation. So it's considered that it is noted that that is the case, you know, it's not ignored, but it's considered that suitable landscaping can be provided to help soften the visual impact of that. And in terms of things like climate change, that would be accounted for in terms of the surface water drainage calculation. So they have to provide the most recent rainfall data plus or minus a certain percent to account for climate change. And that is the standard that's required by the IDB and the LLFA. And they would have considered that when they were assessing the submitted details. And they have recommended conditions to secure more details of this surface water management strategy. Again, noting that it is an outline, but they're happy with the details that have been provided, considering that this is an outline. Sorry, going to my next page. In terms of the encroachment of the development, following on from pre-app, so this has been reduced from the pre-app layout, and it's considered that what's proposed at this stage is acceptable. Again, it is indicative. It's an outline application. Considering the heritage assets, so apologies it was not explicit in my report. I think I did mention it in my presentation, I may not have, but I was waiting for some further information from the Conservation Officer. So paragraph 212 states, and I'm just going to read this verbatim, when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation, and the more important the asset, the greater the weight should be. This is irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, total loss, or less than substantial harm to its significance. So the Conservation Officer considers the potential harm from the proposal to be less than substantial harm at a moderate scale. And the reason why it's being considered to be less than substantial is that the development itself is not proposed to impact the actual physical fabric of the heritage assets. So the listed buildings in the conservation area. So that's why that conclusion was reached. And it's also worth just remembering that in the NPPF, any public benefit must outweigh whatever harm is identified. And again, that was set out in the presentation. And my last point, I promise, the comments regarding it's not clear for a multi-user path to be created. So as previously stated, there's approximately £40,000 proposed to be secured as a financial contribution towards the Strawberry Line. I should perhaps state that there is no specific policy in our local plan that requires this contribution. This contribution has been agreed through negotiations with the developers and has been agreed. I would say, however, that the Section 106 is still under negotiation. So whilst we have twin-tracked it to commence that process sooner to sort of, because these things take a long time, it is still under negotiation. It hasn't been signed, sealed or anything like that. I'm going to pass to my colleague, Emma from Highways now to discuss about all those matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It almost feels like a little bit of a poison chalice. Many of the speakers have raised highways concerns. I'm going to address those I can in a brief period of time. Obviously, if you, as councillors, have any further questions, then please, during your time to speak, do come back to me. The one thing I'd like to say is that I have been involved in extensive conversations with Parish Council and with developers to try and establish what can and can't be done in the area. The applicants have done extensive investigations into what they can provide as far as a safe crossing point is concerned. It should be noted that the policy does say should be, not must be provided. Semantics, but it should be. If I'm allowed to continue, please. Thank you. The applicant can only put forward what they can under highway land. If there is third-party land that is restricting the widening of footways, which would be required in the where is currently the informal crossing, and I mention the words informal crossing because there are no tactile paving slabs, therefore it cannot be classed as a formal crossing point. One member of the public did mention or stress the fact that it's called an informal crossing because it is. There are no tactile paving points, and therefore it cannot be considered a formal crossing point. That area of paving to the south of the A371 is just too narrow to put tactile paving slabs on. There is a privately owned property to the south further of that during conversations it was mentioned that maybe they might be willing to give up some land. But that's not what the applicant was able to provide me to look at. That's not what I was able to look at. And until you have that in writing from that landowner that they will give up that land, the applicant can do nothing further. Recent speeding vehicles through the village, including one that's caused extensive damage. I think recent speeding vehicles kind of covers that. Unfortunately, you cannot, in any location, mitigate for somebody that is driving too fast. The road has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on it. It has 2 significant bends on it. If somebody is doing 50 miles an hour for a figure out the air around those bends, they are likely to crash.
Much as most people would like to respond to the officer, please do let the officer speak.
To respond to that comment, speed enforcement is a police enforcement issue. The council cannot enforce speeds. That is for the police to enforce.
I know, please, can we play fair on this one? The officer have an opportunity for councillors.
Again, one of the points that was raised was the poor visibility of the new access road onto the A371, so the realigned Roughmore Lane. I would point out that the existing access currently has somewhere between 10 and 15 metres visibility to the north, with a stone wall in the way. The new access will have 49 metres to the north, stroke northwest, and 56.7 metres to the east, more in both directions than the 43 metres that is required for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, let alone a 20. And the only other bit that I was going to make was, again, comment was made about the existing pathway between the site and the informal crossing point being too narrow for 2 people to pass. Unfortunately, that is a historic footway. There is nothing we can do to the south, and going to the north would narrow the highway. The highway is known that it has large vehicles on it. You cannot narrow that highway and safely allow vehicles that currently use it as an A road to pass. There is specifically a route through, off the highway, off that footway, from the site to that informal crossing point that is available to be used so that people don't have to use that narrower footway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the officers, or we'll, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to chip in with a couple more points. Just to really reiterate the paragraph 212 of the NPPF, which, as the member of the CPRE has mentioned, has been the subject of a recent JR. So it's just to remind members that there is a duty to put great weight on assets significance. So I'd ask you to bear that in mind in the consideration today. And that's another duty on top of the assessment of less than substantial harm. So just a sort of another layer in terms of heritage considerations for you today. Happy to take questions on that, if that'd be helpful. I also just wanted to pick up the point about potential failure of the PTP, and just to clarify to members that the controls set out within the planning regime are included as per the recommendation. So it's important that planning doesn't duplicate any other regimes, and it should be assumed that other regimes will be acting effectively. So just to sort of stay within the planning regime, the recommendations as set out are robust in planning terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the officers, or I'll move to committee members? No. The first committee member is Councillor Sully.
Thank you. I think road safety on our roads is a matter for everybody. We had, in 2025, 711 fatal serious injury collisions, averaging 2 a day, 44 deaths, that's more than 3 per month, and 158,000 prosecutions for speeding. The top 70% of the top causes of serious collision is combined poor observation and excessive speed. There's a paradox. I don't know if anyone else sees it. There's no safe crossing on this road. So that's why there's not a proposed solution for a formalised way of crossing. And as it was commented, there's 2 significant bends. If 20 miles an hour is adhered to, and we can't guarantee that, no one can guarantee, enforcement can't guarantee the 20 miles an hour. But even if it is 20 miles an hour, that's still serious injury, if not death, on that road. So I just have to stop at that point. I find it really, really difficult that we are navigating, pun not intended, the discussion about road safety. We have a problem in road safety in the county. I've spent some time with road safety police and discussed it. And if you meet people that have faced the tragedy of losing people, it's very, very extreme, very difficult and tragic. So that's my first, the paradox of saying there's no place to cross, to put in a formal solution for crossing the road, the word there's no safe, and then at the same time expecting people to cross that road when people live there. The other concern I've got is the point that was raised about the views from Deers Leap, and the fact the village is a dark skies village, isn't it? I know that was going to be at the material consideration, but I can't see how you can have a development of that size, how you can manage that you wouldn't impact dark skies. So yeah, I do feel that I have major concerns with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Song. I now have.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I'll continue on the theme of pedestrian links. I'm noting policy WM1, part 6, about that safe pedestrian links should be provided to enable access on foot to the village core. So that's, for me, questioning where is the village core and where is the pedestrian link to the village core? And also our local plan policy DP9 says that development should be supported, or we should support development where it makes safe and satisfactory provision for access by all means of travel, particularly by means other than the private car. So that's the policy hook there. And on other schemes, including in my ward or division, I've basically put my foot down and said we've got to have a pedestrian crossing here as you come into Frome, because otherwise people, children, parents with buggies, people with mobility impaired people in wheelchairs, or basically, would it pass your friends and family test? Would you let your children cross the road? Would you let your elderly parents cross the road? And if the answer is no, and it fills you with horror, then it's a no. So I've got questions about the 20 mile an hour zone proposal. Does that include a physical design measures to actually slow traffic, or do we not know yet? Or might it include a pedestrian crossing in that? Because the traffic is slowed down sufficiently to enable one under different conditions. I don't know. Where is the pedestrian route to the village core from the site? Is it both sides of the road or just the south, or can it go through the off-road route? Is there actually a safe and satisfactory link on foot to the village core? I'm not sure that there is. And I think we could refuse it on that ground or defer until we are satisfied, until the parish council perhaps is satisfied that there is in this proposal. And I'm thinking of that as an option as well. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyden. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, both Emma and I would please, just on both points raised there and by Councillor Sully. So in terms of the dark skies consideration, there's no specific policy in respect of dark skies requirement. However, due to the bat sensitivities of the site, there would be a lighting condition anyway. So it's kind of a byproduct of protecting the bats. There therefore would be sensitive lighting strategy. In terms of this informal crossing point, so I understand that to date there are no pedestrian injuries recorded at that informal crossing point within the last 5 years. Within the last 5 years, sorry, but nevertheless, that's what the information is. The site is allocated for residential development, and the policy sets out that there must be these further investigations. Those investigations have taken place. There isn't anywhere that this formalised crossing can be provided due to the reasons. Please do not speak whilst I'm speaking. Let me finish. There's nowhere that's been identified due to the reasons that we've set out collectively as a team here. In terms of the concerns regarding speeding, but again, that is a police matter. 20 miles an hour is safer than the current speed limit of 30 miles an hour. I think that was it. What was the topic? Sorry. Yeah, that's everything. Yeah, so I'll pass to my colleague. Here you go.
I think Amelia's covered most of it, to be fair. The only other thing that I was going to mention was in response to one of your points, Councillor Boyden, regarding the measures put in place for the 20-mile-an-hour speed reduction. Because of the nature of the A road, you wouldn't be able to put anything physical in place, like speed bumps, etc., etc. But currently there is a distinct lack of, not signage, because the signage is where it should be. As you come into the village from the north-northwest direction, so you're coming southeast into the village, there is not much in the way of visual clues to tell you that you are currently in a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Most of the visual clues that we all get from a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit are street lighting, built-up area. None of that exists when you come into the village from that direction in a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Part of what is being put forward is an improvement to that signage to help with visual clues for drivers to come into the 30, and then obviously to go into a 20 where there will be the necessary signage and gateway signs, etc., to show that you are into a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Okay. Thank you. Can I come back on that? Yeah, just I still don't really understand what the safe pedestrian route to the village core means. So could someone point to a map on the screen, go back a bit? And also, what did the parish council propose, which officers didn't agree with, and the parish council feel ignored about? What was the point they were making that you didn't think was possible? Thanks.
So in respect of your first point, so the connection is this public right-of-way. So there is an existing pavement. It is narrow along the south side of Stoke Road. So the application, is my cursor there? Yeah, so the application site's there. As part of one of the heads of terms of the Section 106, there is proposed to be a connection to this public right-of-way, which then connects up here to this corner. So as you can see, this wayfinder bit there. There is please do not speak whilst I'm talking. There is a stone stile there, which is noted that it does impact accessibility. And then that is the crossing point.
Please, can we listen to the officers in silence, please, out of respect for what they are attempting to do? Would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. So that is the informal crossing point. So the village core is so that's the shop approximately there on the north side of Stoke Road. And then from what I understand, the other amenities are up this direction, is that right? Yeah, the school and all of that are up that way. I can't remember what the other point was now that you were going to say. Yes.
The bulk of the parish council's suggestion was to increase the width of that footway, and as I say, that it requires.
Yeah, which side do you need?
The property owner here to allow land to do that. And at the moment, that is in third-party control. I don't know if the applicants have had further conversations with that landowner, but at the moment, that's not in the gift of highways to provide it. So therefore, it can't be provided as part of a crossing point. And it is physically too narrow at that point to put tactile paving slabs in.
Have you received a formal suggestion from the parish council about that particular bend?
I have received a formal suggestion. The difficulty, like I said at the last committee meeting, is that that doesn't form part of this application.
Okay.
And the applicants have been party to conversations about that.
So it's something you could entertain if there was a formal...
if it came to me formally as part of the application, then yes, I would, not only would I be obliged, but I'd be very happy to consider it further.
Okay.
But as it's not come as part of the application, there's only a certain amount of consideration that I can give to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the applicant hasn't brought it forward. Correct. Okay, that's helpful to clarify that. Right, we'll now move on to Councillor Cameron.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Cameron for Glastonbury. Just a point of order really to our legal team. A couple of the presenters earlier suggested that there was inappropriate lobbying conducted by the council to the EA. I would just like to understand what implications there are and is there any evidence?
I wonder, Councillor, could you give a little bit more detail about that? Are you suggesting that, if you could give a little bit more detail so that I
Can I help you on this? A couple of the speakers suggested that there was a questionable process being applied between the Environment Agency and the local government officers in terms of having a dialogue between the two. And that had been interpreted. And I think that that's what Councillor Cameron is asking.
Well, that dialogue is standard, but I think Amelia, who will be able to give a bit more information about that.
Sorry, Chair. The word lobbying was clearly used by one of the presenters between Somerset Council and the EA. And the question I'm posing is, what is the legal implication if that were to have happened? And indeed, is there any evidence to suggest that that happened?
If there has been lobbying, then the decision makers in regard to this application, i.e. councillors who are sitting on this planning committee, will have to ask themselves whether that lobbying has had an adverse impact and has and they are, as a result of it, not able to come to this decision with an open and clear mind.
Sorry, Chair. And do we have any evidence? Maybe the officers could, shed some light on whether there's any evidence of that.
Of course. So I think this was also raised in one of the recent parish council objections as well. And as a result of that, I published the email correspondence between myself and the Environment Agency on the website. So it is standard procedure during the determination of a planning application for the planning officer to negotiate with relevant consultees, such as the Environment Agency, to understand the reasons for their objection and how could that be possibly overcome. In this instance, the reason why the EA, hearing that they objected 3 times is perhaps a bit of a misnomer. Yes, there were 3 objections lodged, but that's because there were additional rounds of consultation. So it wasn't like it was 3 different objections. Those objections were lodged because there was a lack of understanding from the Environment Agency regarding the phosphate mitigation strategy and the need, therefore, for the packaged treatment plant. As part of those negotiations, we had a roundtable meeting with myself, representatives from the Environment Agency, the agent and their consultant who was working on the phosphate mitigation strategy. And it was effectively explanation session to the Environment Agency to explain why this was fundamental to the phosphate mitigation strategy. It certainly wasn't lobbying, it certainly wasn't anything unusual in terms of the planning officer's role when determining and negotiating during a planning application. And like I say, I have published the correspondence between myself and the EA on the website for, full disclosure to make it clear that this is why the objection was changed to a recommendation of condition. Hopefully that's cleared things up.
Not on that particular point, but I have a second question, if I may, Chair.
Certainly, I'll move to a second question unless somebody wants to particularly specifically take up this single issue. Councillor Denham?
Yeah, I'm a little bit can't quite understand about the phosphate mitigation. Why? We're presumably referring to phosphate mitigation through sewage waste, not through farm waste. And in which case, why is a packaged treatment plant preferable to connection to the sewer?
Okay, so the packaged treatment plant is needed in conjunction with the fallowing of approximately 1 hectare of agricultural land. If the packaged treatment plant wasn't used, they would need to fallow the equivalent of 61, what they call hectares of cereals land. So by using the packaged treatment plant, because that effectively does the work of 60 hectares of cereals land in terms of reducing the phosphate output. That's why this method has been put forward, which utilises the packaged treatment plant rather than the connection to the main sewer.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper as well, isn't it, for Wessex Water to do that? I mean, I don't want to see it furrowed, but this is. I asked this question, put this question out there. There may not be an answer, but is this the thin end of the wedge? Every time we get a planning application, Wessex Water are obliged to connect to the sewer. But if instead they're going to give us packaged treatment plants every time, is that adequate? And should this be something this committee is looking out for? You know, I understand the answer now, but I'm not convinced by it.
Okay. I understand that. I won't say what I think about it, but I'll say that for later. Okay, Councillor Cameron, do you want to come back with your second question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Reid.
Very quickly, and it builds on the road safety question. And given that I've been putting a number of TRO submissions in for Glastonbury, clearly we've got a traffic issue here already in the village. So the question is, has the parish already previously submitted such TROs, such as road crossing points, to highways previously?
No surprise, it's going to be me answering that one. Not to the best of my knowledge, no TROs have been submitted by the Parish Council. I have consulted with colleagues who have in turn consulted with the police, who would be supportive of a reduction in speed to 20.
So I think the Parish Council could do that.
Can I perhaps speak on behalf of the Parish Council, as I've been a Parish Councillor in Westbury South Mendip since 1990 something or other, and throughout that period of time the Parish Council has continually raised the issue with Somerset Council and about speeding, about what could be done. In conjunction with the school, they had officers down suggesting the safest point for the school to cross the road to get to the school playing fields, which is why you've got the informal crossing. And the very best we got to, which then changed because of the change of officers at the council, was we would have a gateway at each end of the village to actually try and slow the traffic down, to recognise that this was and there was a scheme to remove the white lines, there was the scheme to do something with the turning right, but each time a proposal was put forward, either there wasn't the officer capacity or unwillingness to take on the proposals. I think that would be fair to say. It doesn't mean to say that the Parish Council's being negligent, but it's been a succession of stories ever since the bypass of the A371 was cancelled in the 1990s.
Just to add to that, the proposal for the 20 miles an hour, although you're absolutely right, Chair, that the Parish Council have been in no way negligent by not doing it. It is being funded by, it is being installed by, or funding for the installation is coming from this proposal and from the applicants, rather than from Somerset Council or from the Parish Council's purse.
Thank you for that. Unless there's anything further, I will then move to Councillor Reid, and I note Councillor Dank and also Councillor Demery wish to say something. And also, sorry, Councillor Hart. Could I go with Councillor Reid now, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's an awful lot to pick out of this, isn't there? There's one thing or another. I'm going to stick with the main thrust of the matter, which is highway safety. I mean, everybody who's driven from Wells to Cheddar, if they described that road, they may well call it narrow, but I think that would be an understatement. It is not a great road, which of course is why the Strawberry Line is such an important thing to get people away from it. A couple of questions here. Pedestrian crossings. We hear it's too narrow for a pedestrian crossing, and yet if we don't have a pedestrian crossing, we're ripping a community in two, and I don't think that's acceptable. I'm really thinking of supporting Councillor Boyden's proposal that we ask them to go away and look at this again. We've got to give the developers anyway a chance to talk to the landowner who seems to be holding it up to see if we can get one in. I think it's absolutely vital that something has to be done there. And my second question, Chair, talking of the Strawberry Line, I did note that there is a link to the Strawberry Line from this site, but I did also notice one of the public speakers saying that the link was inadequate. So could you please tell us what sort of link this was? Is this a suitable link for pedestrians and cyclists? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've just brought the slide up again. So there is an existing public right-of-way that goes to the south, as shown on the purple. So the red arrows kind of indicate the Strawberry Line, so the star being the application site. So this is a footpath. So yes, pedestrians can use it, but not cyclists because of it being a public footpath. Again, part of the Section 106 is the provision of about £40,000 towards the improvement of the Strawberry Line. The other thing regarding the crossing, I just want to re-emphasise that this is an allocated site, and the policy is quite clear that further investigation will be required of traffic impacts, and a safe access onto the A371 will be required. In respect to those points, the further investigation has been carried out, and the vehicular access is considered to be safe. The next sentence is, safe pedestrian links should be provided to enable access on foot to the village core. So it's not must. There is quite a distinction in that. And those investigations have not found there to be a suitable point for this formalised crossing point. The only thing that can be done, as things currently stand, is this 20-mile-an-hour speed reduction. And I appreciate that the whole of that A road from Cheddar to Wells is a difficult road. However, it is not the responsibility of this development to deliver improvements to the whole of that stretch. It has to be reasonable, and it is reasonable to expect a reduction in speed limit along the affected stretch of that A road. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else. No. Okay.
Thank you. I'm very conscious that we are a couple of members down, and also two people have left the room, understandably, for comfort breaks. And we're going to be getting to a stage when we're not quorate to vote, because if anyone leaves the room can't vote. So what I suggest is I will take a comfort break now for everybody. Please can members of the committee not have a conversation with either yourselves or with the large number of attendees here. It is really important. We've got to do this by the book to make sure that we're not challenged legally in any way. So on that basis, I would like to suggest that we have a break until just after 20 past.
Mostly, Chair, unsatisfactory about the crossing. I rather think we need to revisit that. But also the answer about the link to the Strawberry Line, I think a muddy footpath is totally inadequate. And I rather hope that we upgrade that to a proper cycle path, Chair, to make it more available to all.
Thank you. I think that point's been noted, and we'll come back when we talk about the recommendation. I now have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to mention this road crossing at all, or the Strawberry Line. I'm more concerned with the role of the quality review panel that we seem to rely on for our input, who recommended this site should have 40 houses. The site plan, when you look at it, was 60 houses. It looks to be a view similar to that of a caravan site at Weston-super-Mare. Everything is just squeezed in, got small gardens, Lord knows where the parking is, on the road presumably, and the whole layout is quite cramped. And I have mentioned at these before that the old layouts used to do, back in the 70s and the 80s, they had 20 houses to the hectare. And those layouts, you could see it in the width of the roads. The transport could get around a lot more easily. The gardens were bigger. Everybody had more space. Everybody had a garage. And the whole place was much more pleasant to live in than somewhere that's doing 30 to the acre, to the hectare. I think we've got an opportunity here to say the quality review panel said 40. Let's have 40. And I think these people from Westbury and the parish council and everybody else, they seem to be quite content with 40. And if we can have 40, that would be good. But when we get to the reserve matters stage, where we're good, so we might say, yes, well, let's do 60. We get to the reserve matters stage. At that point, the whole thing is lost. We voted for 60, and we will end up with 60, maybe a couple more, who knows, because they put in an application for more. And it will all be downhill after that. The builder would do pretty much what he's already intended to do. And this is our only real opportunity to affect this development at the outline planning stage. So if we can have 40, I'd go along with it. If we're having one more than 40, I wouldn't go along with it. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come in there just to respond to his points, please? So the policy states a minimum of 40 dwellings. In terms of the density, the planning policies from our local plan sets out what are acceptable densities, and this scheme is compliant with that policy. Your comment regarding that, wider roads. If you have wider roads, you also have higher speeds. Having a narrower road tends to lend itself to slower speeds. So I don't think it was the QRP who stated 40, but the policy is minimum of 40, and the description of development is up to 60. So there isn't, if consent were to be granted, it can only be up to 60 dwellings. It can't be 61. Yeah, they would have to come in again for outline consent.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Highways officer mentioned earlier about traffic calming measures, i.e. speed bumps and so on, that those things were not possible on a major road. Stratton-on-the-Foss is a standard example of an A road having chicanes across it. So it is being done elsewhere. So why should this be any different? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond or just... No? Okay. Councillor Dunk, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure where to start, really. I think I'm going to tidy up some of the loose ends, like the pedestrian crossing. Is it possible and this is just a suggestion, that to have that as a condition, that it can't go through without finding out whether there is an ability to buy some extra land to make a decent crossing. Because it's a slightly absurd thing to give permission for 40 or 60 houses and then have a very poor ability to cross the road. I mean, I don't live there, so I can't comment, but that's just one thing, okay? Could that be conditioned as part of it? So if it fails, then the application fails. I'm just trying to clarify the package treatment plant. Isn't it the case that it's the applicant that's going to pay for that rather than Wessex Water, and Wessex Water might adopt it? It seems to me that the applicant would have had to have, I can't remember how many hectares it was quite a lot, wasn't it, in mitigation, if you went down the route of pumping it to the sewage station, or sewage area. So that's basically a cheaper option for the developer or whoever owns the land. The footpath, I was going to suggest that either in addition to or alternatively to the contribution to the Strawberry Line, because I don't know how much that length of path from the village that connects to the potential Strawberry Line, but I noticed there's a missing bit there. Unfortunately, it's not complete there. But you want a multi-user path that connects the village to that. Who's going to pay for that? Could the developer pay for that? Or is it premature? So those are the sort of things. But my main point, sorry, those were side issues. But the main point was, I was very impressed with the CPRE. They tend to put their finger on it for me. That basically this is very close to a national landscape, and I don't think that people have taken into account the effect it's going to have. And I think also there's been comments that 40 instead of 60 you'd be able to actually landscape the site itself in a way that fitted in better, whereas with 60 you don't seem to have a chance. And so for me, I would want the applicant to come back with a scheme for 40 and also any other additional improvements that we've obviously identified today. But for me, that's what I'd want out of this site. I don't think I would be minded to approve 60 houses, to be perfectly honest. And so that's my contribution.
Can I come in there, please, Ros? Can I just come in and respond to those points, please, just before the conversation moves on further? So regarding the package treatment plant, yes, the developer is to provide that with the aim for that to be eventually adopted by Wessex Water or a different party, depending on the standards of, if Wessex Water are agreeable to that. It would be the fallowing of 61 hectares of land instead of the package treatment plant. So yes, there's the cost element of it, but also 61 hectares would be taken out of agricultural use, I think is probably the key point there, is if they weren't to use the package treatment plant. So that's the fallowing of land approach. So whilst this scheme does include some fallowing of land, it is only 1 and a bit hectare rather than the 61 hectares, which I think is key. In terms of the delivery of the connection to the Strawberry Line, again, I reiterate, the developer is contributing approximately £40,000 under Section 106 towards Strawberry Line improvements. There isn't a specific requirement for that within the local plan. This is part of the negotiations, as they have also on top offered this. Regarding the number of dwellings, the policy is for a minimum of 40 dwellings. So whilst the outline consent is for up to 60 dwellings, this has been considered to be acceptable by officers because of the indicative layout. It's considered that the density is compliant with policy, that the suitable mitigation can be provided in respect of the 8-metre wide landscape buffers. The Mendip Hills National Landscape aren't objecting, they're just setting out what conditions they would like to see. So I would be keen to understand which part of the layout regarding this scale of development is unacceptable. Why is 60 not okay, but in your collectively view, 40 is okay? What is the difference that you would see in the layout in terms of density.
Please, I know you may wish to contribute, but let the officers speak.
Can I just come in on there, Councillor Wyke? I just wanted to make the point that the participation part of the meeting is now closed and it's for members and officers. I appreciate that there's, a high level of public interest and public concern, particularly to do with the principle of development, but officers are trying to do their jobs. They're just trying to articulate the issues to the members so that they have a clear understanding to make a vote. So if I could ask for the members of the audience just to show some restraint in that way and just allow officers to speak, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Can I do a point of order?
Okay.
Really quick.
Is this a point of order?
I just want to
Otherwise-
say it's not it's not a collective about 40 houses. You said we had a collective. Okay, just to say, just so you know. All right.
Apologies, Miss Noma. I just know it's come up a few times, so apologies. Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah.
I'll defer to Councillor Hart. She had a hand up before me. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Martin. So, our highways officer who's present in the room stated that we cannot mitigate, nobody can mitigate against dangerous driving. And I would argue that you can mitigate against dangerous driving to a degree by reducing the car numbers on the road. So in reality, 60 houses will give us definitely 120 cars. And 40 houses will give us probably more like 80 cars. So already there, that is going to be something that would help. And we can come out with whatever we want. That is a reality. I think that Historic England have said that the building should be in and around the farm buildings existing. And if those kind of ideas were followed, we would be looking more in the numbers of 40, which is the number you've heard a few times around the room. And similarly, as Barry said, the quality review panel said the same thing. So I think we do need to find a way to reduce this from where you're heading, which is 60, to 40. And that in itself will also help the numbers of cars on the road and the potential for dangerous driving on the road. Furthermore, if it's too narrow for a crossing, then the responsible thing to do, which I think has already been mentioned by Michael, is really to push this issue with land and trying to purchase some land there to widen the pavement, because we can't just ignore it and keep going, oh, well, the officers can find lots of things here to tick, so we'll just go ahead and do this. That isn't fair on the people who are living in the village.
Thank you. Councillor Dimmery and then
I'd like to make a proposal that we defer this application pending negotiations between Highways, the applicant and the parish council in terms of and the owner of the land that was mentioned, with a view to releasing that land and trying to get access to a safe crossing point in the road. And a second point would be to look again at the quantity of houses and reducing from 60.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to second.
To second that.
Is that a proposal? And could I have a seconder of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Right, I want to finish allow people who wish to speak, and then we'll take that as the first proposal on the table. Yeah.
Just to make a point in there that if that is the wording for the deferral, I would suggest that the need for Highways to be involved in those negotiations for land ownership issues is removed. That is not anything that I can influence, and it is not anything that I need to be, as a highway authority, need to be involved in. Once those land ownership issues are addressed, if then further drawings are sent to me, I am more than happy to consider them, but I do not need to be involved in that negotiation.
Can I just
we'll get the wording right.
Can I just make another point, please, regarding those reasons for deferral? There has to be a policy reason for the reduction of numbers.
Okay, right. Can we have Councillor Denton And then Councillor Reid wanted to come back. We need then to wind this one up.
Thank you. I find it quite ironic that it's church land and the responsibility of the church is to protect landscapes and heritage. It's also about keeping communities safe, and this application does none of those as far as I can see. And what it has done, which the church also does, is bring people together. And it has brought a whole community together against a development which they feel is an overdevelopment for their village. And I cannot support this application.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Reid, you want to come back briefly?
Just briefly, Chair, I'm going to support the deferment motion, but can we add on to look again at the link between the site and the Strawberry Line, Chair?
Yeah, I personally will touch on that in a minute. Councillor Dunk, do you want to come back on anything briefly?
Yes, it was to do with the quanta of housing. I think it's mentioned in one of the landscape reports. I can't remember exactly who, saying that if you had less housing, you would be less constricted in the design of the site and are able to tailor it more to the environment that it's going to be plonked down in. That's pretty obvious, really. 20 houses is, it's half of 40. So you've basically got a 50% increase in housing. It's going to make an impact on the style, the design, and the impact of a housing build. And so I can't really see, it's pretty obvious why that would have less impact if maybe it didn't go as far down the field. You had more green space nearer the rest of the green fields. Yes, it's pretty simple to explain, really.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to respond? And then I think...
So again, the site is allocated. The layout, it wasn't QRP who said it should be 40 dwellings. The policy states a minimum of 40 dwellings. I think if you're wanting to defer because you want a reduction in numbers, as well as there being a need to provide a policy justification for that, the actual harm needs to be identified. So what is the harm that you've identified that requires this reduction in dwellings? I think that needs to be made clear if you're looking for a reason, that being one of the reasons for deferment.
It would be...
Okay.
Yeah. Can I say something here?
Go on, and then we need to...
Yes, it would be harm to the setting of the national landscape.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to say a few words on this. First of all, I think my overall feeling is disappointment. We have an allocated site. I think the community recognise there needs to be housing, but what we've got was originally 40 houses, and that was the basis upon which the planning policy officer said we would have only one contribution to the community, which was the land. It's gone up to 60, but I don't see anything addition to the community. So they half as much again and no difference to the contribution. The second thing is that I'm disappointed again that the amended policy quite clearly states that it's 30 houses, 30% affordable housing. However, in rural areas, the council can negotiate a higher figure. There is nothing in the officer's report about the viability of the site or indeed negotiating more than 30%. So again, I feel disappointed about that. I appreciate the difference between must and should. I think maybe it's the difference between being politely English and being very forcibly must. But the essence of what was being said was safe crossing. And it is very evident that there isn't a safe crossing. And if we can't slow the traffic down at 30 miles an hour, I'm not sure what we can do with 20 miles an hour. And therefore, I do think we need to consider going back and looking again at what can be done in terms of land acquisition to actually do something, because as it stands, it's just not I think, anything we would like to live with as a community. And we're looking at quite significant numbers. The officer talked about 333 additional people. The village has only 800 in total. So, you know, this is a substantial development for this village, and 330 additional people wanting to cross the road to the core of the village. And while we have rights of way paths, they are muddy tracks. It does have a style, which you can't get a pushchair over, a bicycle or anything like that, or yourself, unless you're the best side of 30, I would say. And therefore, I think that we just need to think about being realistic about what is accessible. Doesn't mean it can't be changed, doesn't mean things can't be done, but there needs to be some awareness that the rights of way. And then the other thing, if you look at the site and you look at the whole field, and I don't know if we got a picture there with the rights of way. I think you did show us one, which was really helpful. Yeah. The star is the proposed development site, and that is within the red line. And the church commissioners in due course, no doubt, would like, if they get a planning, to sell it. They own the land, church commissioners own the land between the land south of the star to where the strawberry line is. And I would have thought it would not be an unreasonable request that instead of having their potential land of the future with a footpath going straight halfway across the site at an angle, that we actually had a straight, properly constructed 3-metre path with 1 metre shoulders on each side going down alongside the hedge line. And if we've got builders on site, then I think it should be a contribution. And we talk about contributions. Unlike the last one, I think most of us remembered in Shepton, this one's got, the statutory bodies are only asking £3,500 per dwelling. And if you include the strawberry line contribution, that takes it to just over 4,000 per dwelling. And that is de minimis in terms of contributions. So I think asking for a properly constructed path, plus this, I think, established percentage per house, is not an unreasonable ask, particularly if they get more than 40 houses, because it was very specific in the Mendip policy that it was 40 houses and only a contribution of some land. And so I think asking for that is not, again, unreasonable. I also would like, something I'm particularly peeved about is that as a parish council, we asked Somerset Council on more than one occasion over the last 20 years or so, if we could buy the mortar pits. That's the piece of land adjacent to the A371, which provides really essential for a village which sits on the side of a hill, flat level parking. And I noticed this morning as I went by, there was a Somerset Council school bus, a Somerset Council highways engineering vehicle there, and 3 cars. And it's been reduced down to some bits, 2 cars in one place and 3 on another on the site. I don't think that's acceptable. If you weren't going to prepare to sell it to the parish council, it would have been really nice to actually have a reasonable solution to where people can park cars in the village. I make that point mainly because I got the no thank you letter on more than one occasion. So, right. And I think the other thing which I do think is quite important is that people around the room have talked about, let's see if we can get it right. Let's defer till something gets done. The parish council has really worked hard to try and do a shared production, so to speak. We saw it work well in Shepton. CJ Fry and Shepton Town Council worked together, no objections, and they ended up with a really superb development. So could I suggest that the agents for the church commissioners, as you rightly say, and we've approached church commissioners on this on more than one occasion, is let's see if we can get something right by getting the the crossing safe, getting some decent public parking linked into it, and getting the Strawberry Line resolved. And that's for the numbers. I do think, like it or not, policy-wise, being able to have a more representative layout which reflects the rest of the community would be really welcomed, and I certainly would like to see that too. We've got a very distinctive style of layout within the community, and this is not reflected in this allocation. I think I've said enough, but I'm disappointed. This could have been so much better.
Thank you, Councillor White. I just thought I'd jot down what I think councillors have discussed, and I'll check with Leslie that everybody's happy, and anything that's not covered in the resolution, just check that everybody's happy to include that. You're happy to go along those lines? So reconsideration of the quantum, the crossing point options, highway safety measures, Strawberry Line, public parking. Yeah, I just wrapped it all up together due to concerns with highway safety, pedestrian safety, density and character and appearance. Landscape. And landscape.
If just to help members, I think we've had a situation where Councillor Dimmery and Councillor Dunk effectively put forward a motion, and then you raised some of your concerns, Councillor White. So Councillor Dimmery raised 3 points. So firstly, the point about highway safety and the need to negotiate the various points to try and improve public access. He raised the point about looking at the density and trying to reduce the quantum of development proposed. And at that point, it was raised by Milli's case officer that you needed to refer to a policy basis for that concern. And Councillor Dunk came back with harm to the natural landscape. So we've got effectively a policy concern driven by DP1 and DP4. And then the final point was the link between the site and the Strawberry Line. So at that point, there was a motion on the table, and that was seconded by Councillor Dunk. And then Councillor Reid, and then Councillor White, you obviously made your statements of the various points. I know that the legal advisor now wants to come in.
My records indicate that the proposal was made by Councillor Dimmery and seconded by Councillor Susie Hart. I confirm that my recollection of the words of the proposal are set out as per what the officer has just read out.
Okay.
I've looked at my notes, Martin, from what you said at the time.
Can I ask Councillor Dimmery if he's prepared to amend his proposal?
I'm prepared to amend it.
You've got your mic on.
I understand that highways is not involved in negotiations.
You didn't have your mic on.
Oh, sorry. I understand that highways is not to be involved. Can I ask a question of practice? Would traffic management be involved in this? I'd just like to see an officer, if at all possible, involved in these negotiations. But if they can't be, they can't be. But I think the distinction. Yeah. Case officer, I'd be happy with that. So the distinction, Councillor Dimmery, is the negotiation on land ownerships. So as the officer team from the Planning Authority and the Highway Authority, we can get involved in responding to solutions that are presented to us. But in terms of securing land from a third party, we don't have any power to do that.
Excuse me, could I add, I think Councillor Boyden wants to add a couple of policies.
Yeah, I think to clarify, I think that the policy hooks that we're looking for include our local plan policy DP3 on heritage conservation, and we should refer to Historic England's concerns about the impacts that they have concerns regarding the application on heritage grounds, which we need to refer to, because they do want some pulling back of the development, although that's not an objection. They have concerns in historic England, so we can refer to DP3. We can refer to DP4, I think you've already said, about Mendip's landscapes, and also DP7, the design and amenity of new development, because that refers to the scale of development appropriate to local context. So you can talk about heritage and landscape there, but also the access needs of all users. And there's also DP9, the transport impact of new development, which does talk about supporting development where it makes safe and satisfactory provision for access by all means of travel, particularly by means other than the private car. And that's the main policy hook on requiring a good safe pedestrian access, which is the main problem. So I'd like to use DP9 as well, and basically in order to enable the applicant to undertake further investigations and to provide and secure safe and satisfactory pedestrian access to village core local services for all, because currently we're not happy that they do. We can take those on board, I'll be happy. Thank you.
Again, Councillor Boyden, I think your policy references are fine within the context of the three reasons why Councillor Dimmery and Councillor Hart put forward their motion to defer making a decision for those three reasons. Firstly, the highway safety point of view. Secondly, the quantum of development. And thirdly, the link between the Strawberry Line. That's the basis that the alternative motion to the case officer recommendation was put forward and seconded. So I think you just need to be mindful, if you're going to have a vote now, that's what you're voting on.
Okay. Is everyone clear what's happening so far? Councillor Clark?
I'm concerned about the detail of the wording, Chair. I think the words were we'll get the numbers reduced. 60 to 58 is a reduction. I would like to see it specifically 60 to not more than 45. And I think then that's going to upset the people from the parish.
Councillor Dimmery?
With reluctance, I don't know if I could accept that as an amendment, because I think we have to have an assessment, landscape assessment, to determine how many houses is reasonable there. And while I'm sympathetic to the view, I don't want this proposal to be stymied by being too specific about the number of houses.
Okay, so in summary, since you have made the note, would you like to read out the areas you think you're covering and see whether Councillor Dimmery and Hart are happy?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the deferral is based on further investigations to improve highway access, largely pedestrian access across the highway. Deferral to review the quantum of development proposed, and deferral to investigate improving the link between the application site and the Strawberry Line.
Can we say
public?
So they get the message, it's not 60.
Can you, sorry, Councillor Hart, can you put your mic on?
Oh, yeah. Can you just read the second one out? It's not on yet. Oh, sorry. It's not working.
Go on.
Could you read the second one out again?
So it would be deferral to the... It would be deferral to review the quantum of development proposed.
Could you say referral to significantly review? So they get the message. We don't mean 60 to 58. Yeah, what do you mean no? Yes, it's...
Sorry, I'm just Martin. I think it's muddy in the water.
Well, significantly just means
We don't mean to. If I can just say, obviously, the planning agent's in the room today, so the concern that you've expressed, no doubt, will have been noted.
Because this is the second time we've deferred. It's like they're not getting the message. I really hope that they get the message, because when we defer, it's free. If we refuse, then it's a new application and a cost.
Have you included public car parking?
Haven't, Chair, because at the time that the alternative motion was proposed and seconded, those were the 3 points
Okay.
that were being referenced.
I'm asking whether Councillor Dimmery will amend his proposal to include public car parking.
Chairman, I'm happy to include that. I do want specific, if this can be included, specific reference to the case officer, the applicant, the landowner and the parish council getting together to discuss the release of that land to try to enable that crossing point.
Okay.
I'd like that specified if that's relevant.
It's relevant. Obviously, we've heard what you've said. Clearly, as I said earlier on, we can't force another landowner to give us their land.
I fully accept that. It's the endeavour I'm requesting.
So you've accepted the public car parking as an issue, and you've also accepted the inadequate access to the Strawberry Line. Yep. Okay.
Chairman, just on the public car parking point of view, I know what you say, obviously, about the parish council's desire to secure that land, obviously not a planning issue.
No, I appreciate that.
But in terms of this proposal, it's not resulting in the loss of any of that public car parking?
It is.
So is there a net loss? No net loss. So
no, it's not actually technically true. If you look at the report, it assumes that there are 5 cars with a particular length of car. And quite frankly, we all know there's a lot more than 5 cars and many small ones and vehicles get in there. So I think there is an assumption. I'm not going to labour the point further, but there is a reduction because of the assumptions made that it's 5 cars of each of sort of estate length.
If I may,
go on, correct me.
At the risk of labouring the point, the area known as Mortar Pits locally is being removed. There is replacement for 5 parking spaces being put inside the realigned Roughmore Lane. Please don't forget that there is also the community land that has its own car park. So you will actually end up with significantly more public car parking in that location than you currently have with Mortar Pits.
I will perhaps beg to differ on that one, but I take your point.
So the original 3 were reference to improving highway safety for pedestrians with reference to clause 6 of policy WM1. There was a requirement to review the quantum of development proposed with reference to policies DP3, DP1, DP4, DP7. There was the deferral to review the link between the site and the Strawberry Line. So those were the 3. We've then had the debate about the deferral to review whether or not there's a loss of public car parking and is the scheme sufficient. I'm not 100% sure if that has made it into the motion that you're going to vote on, based in mind what you've just heard from the case officer and the highways officer.
I'm prepared to stand down on it, but it's still a grievance for me personally.
Thank you. I actually can't envisage the car parking issue. I'm not from that area. I was relying entirely on your knowledge, your local knowledge. So from a personal point of view, I can't include that within my own proposal.
I think the chair said that she's happy for the vote to go forward on those 3 points. Is that right, Chair?
Yes, that's right. Is everyone clear what you're voting on? Yep. So we have a proposal from Councillor Dimmery, seconded by Councillor Hart, We will, sorry, Councillor Clark.
How long are we deferring for, Chair?
Sorry?
How long are we deferring for?
3 months. 3 months, 6 months?
1.5.
I think it's not so much the deferment, we want to get this resolved. And if it takes more than 3 months, up to 6, but preferably 3. Yep. People content? Go on.
Just to confirm that Councillor Dawn Denton and myself are not able to vote?
Yep, that's correct. So on that basis, could I have a show of hands for people who are supporting the proposal? Nine. Any against? Any abstentions? No. I think you have a full plate. Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it's been a long journey. Can we take 5 minutes and then we need to move on very properly onto the second application. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. We have a second application in front of us. Just to remind people, this came before the Planning Committee some time ago, and it was deferred until such times as there was resolution of some issues. However, because it was some time ago and the Planning Committee in front of us is not the same as the one who looked at it originally, I asked the officers to kindly take us through the application, not in an hour's presentation, but briefly, so we do understand the issues as well as the cause for the deferment. Thank you very much indeed. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. I have got quite a few slides, but I noted trying to keep it short. So if I whiz through, please tell me to stop if I'm going too fast. So this is the presentation for agenda item 6. The site address is Wellhays Farm in the parish of Pilton. The proposal is for the conversion of 3 barns into 4 four-bedroom dwellings. Oh. What was it? So this application was previously discussed at the Planning Committee held in the morning of the 3rd of December 2024. Members at that time resolved to defer their decision on the application to allow the submission of additional information relating to the flood risk assessment. I'll now go through the background information relating to the application and the officer recommendation as it was presented then. Here's the location plan showing the red line extending to the adopted highway at Lower Westholme Road. Here is an aerial view of the site in its context. Here's an aerial shot zoomed in on the main site to show the existing site layout. Here is the flood map from the time the application was previously discussed, with the site outlined in red. Dark blue shows flood zone 3, light blue shows flood zone 2, and the amber lines show the flood defences either side of the main river. From the original consultation exercise, of most note were the Environment Agency comments. They objected to the proposal because they found the FRA was not adequate. The EA considered that the FRA did not adequately consider a range of flooding events and their effects, and that it did not take into account the impacts of climate change. The Environment Agency comments gave further guidance, including that the proposal should demonstrate the development will be safe for occupants for its designed lifetime of 100 years, and that the single-storey accommodation should be reconsidered. These comments and the associated harm of the development and that the site was in flood zone 3 formed the main basis for the recommendation for refusal of the application. Here's a summary of the 3 previous reasons for refusal. These related to the principle
that the site was outside development limits, the application failed to demonstrate the site was redundant, and the application failed to demonstrate the buildings would not require major or complete reconstruction for the conversion. The proposal failed to demonstrate that it was appropriate development in flood zone 3 as per the EA comments, and the proposal failed to demonstrate appropriate foul drainage could be achieved for the development because the site's location in flood zone 3. So following the deferral, a large amount of amended and additional information was submitted. This included amended drawings showing raised finished floor levels, structural inspection reports and assessments, amended and additional information relating to flood risk, flood mitigation and foul drainage arrangements, and a marketing report for the existing building for an economic use. Following receipt of the additional information, a full reconsultation exercise was undertaken. Here's the flood map again at the time of the previous planning committee. Oh, sorry. This is the latest flood map. As you can see, there's been some amendments to the Environment Agency data, but not where the current site is located. As a result of the further details submitted, the Environment Agency has confirmed withdrawal of its previous objection to the proposal. They stated that the additional information provided the clarity they required, providing there is a condition to secure the details of the FRA. In addition, Somerset Public Rights of Way didn't object to the proposal but provided advice, and Somerset Contaminated Land did not object. In addition to the submitted flood risk information, the proposal satisfactorily demonstrates that safe foul drainage arrangements can be achieved. The marketing report demonstrates that the building is redundant and does not have a realistic or viable prospect of securing an alternative economic use within a reasonable timeframe. Given that the previously identified technical and policy harms have now been removed, the proposal has been reassessed in principle. In undertaking this assessment, significant weight has been given to the current position in respect to the Council's 5-year housing land supply. On balance, it is concluded that the Should have bought a mouse. The residual harms arising from the proposal do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, which include the reuse of the fabric of the existing buildings and the 4 dwellings being created. So the amendments submitted included alterations to the building. So I'll just run through the drawings. Here is the location plan again. On the left is building 1, which is proposed to be plots 3 and 4. The right is building 2, which is proposed to be plots 1 and 2. The 2 top photos show the access left and right onto the adopted highway, and below the internal access into the site. Here is the existing site plan. The yellow areas show the portions of the existing buildings to be removed. Here's the proposed site plan showing the 4 plots. First of all, we'll look at plots 1 and 2. Here are the existing elevations. Here are the first proposed elevations. And here are the amended elevations, which show the finished floor levels being raised, highlighted here. And I've got some measurements showing the approximate internal heights. These measurements are taken from internal finished floor levels to the eaves of the building to give an approximation of the internal head heights at the lowest edges of the building. Here I've measured changes in heights in relation to the finished floor levels of 2-storey plot 1, with the measurements of approximately 2.4 metres on the ground floor and approximately 1 metre at the eaves. I've also annotated the measurement from the internal finished floor levels to show the point where the external eaves, from the external eaves to show 2 metres head height. I've measured the change in heights for plot 2. Previously it's 2.5, now approximately 2 metres. So it's considered that there will be some compromise in the internal space to the accommodation and the higher finished floor levels, but this is not considered significantly harmful to warrant refusal. Here's the existing ground floor plan. Here are the areas to be removed. The purple area shows the 2-storey portion of plot 1. Here are the proposed ground floor plans for plots 1 and 2. Here's the first floor plan for plot 1. As you can see, the layout reflects the reduced head heights. So back to the site plan. We'll be looking at detailed building 1, which is for plots 3 and 4. Here's the existing elevations. Here's the originally proposed elevations for 3 and 4. Here are the amended elevations with the raised floor levels highlighted. Again, I've measured the approximate change in heights in relation to the finished floor levels from the measurements approximately from 2.4 metres to approximately 2 metres right in the corners of the buildings. Here's the existing ground floor plan. Here are the proposed ground floor plans for 3 and 4. Back to the site plan to consider building 3. Here's the existing ground floor plan and the existing elevations. So the recommendation is therefore to approve with conditions as summarised here and here. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I don't have any speakers on this, so I guess it's up to us if we want to raise any issues or whatever. I'll just kick off with one. And it's not clear from your presentation, or maybe I just missed it. What's the mitigation we're now making for a 100-year event?
Sorry, it's predominantly the raised floor levels and showing that the buildings are capable of conversion, and that the flood data has also improved. So it's all about the people in the buildings being safe because of those factors.
So given they raised the floor level, how much have they raised it by, and does that meet the concerns of the Environment Agency? How have they I'm trying to get an understanding of whether it's somebody safe and they can walk out, or whether they're actually saving the building. And it seems to me that...
So the change in floor levels are approximately 37 centimetres.
Yeah, that's just over a foot.
That's right. And the flood events calculated would be either mitigated totally, or within safe levels within the building.
Okay. So in essence, what they've done is to allow somebody to exit the building. It doesn't save the building per se.
No.
And linked into that, why is there concern about the ridge heights? What's the reason for that?
It's just to demonstrate that even though they've raised the floor levels, they're retaining the existing buildings, and they've still got adequate head height.
So they're using the existing ridge height?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, fine, thank you. Sorry, I'm just... Martin.
Once again, I'm going to defer to Ewan, actually. He might be saying what I'm about.
Okay, go on, Ewan. And then Rob.
So what I'm trying to get clarity on is, as the chair has said, so we're being asked to authorise a build on a site that we expect to flood.
Yep.
Sorry, you can see I'm struggling all of a sudden. And therefore we're saying that 37 centimetres is going to be sufficient to keep them dry, based on the data that we have at the moment.
Keep people alive by able to walk out the building, I think is what she inferred.
We've just gone through a major incident in Somerset, whereby we've been trying to, sort out people in flooded zones, etc. And it just strikes me as a bit bonkers that we're about to authorise a build in a flood zone 3 area when we've gone through huge expense as a county, not only in prevention and pumps, but also then dealing with the aftermath. And this just strikes me as an aftermath situation waiting to happen.
Councillor Reid, or do you want to respond to that?
Yes, please, Chair. So the general approach in terms of flood zones, this is Environment Agency mapping, and the purpose of the flood zones is essentially to say, in these zones we do X, and X is directing development away from the areas at the highest risk of flooding. This is obviously an area at the highest risk of flooding, other than being within a river itself. But the exception to that, and I'm not talking about the exception test, but the exception to that sequential approach is where you're dealing with a change of use. So a change of use is what we're dealing with here, because the building is in place. So as Lindsay was showing, there's no new buildings, we're getting some bits of buildings removed. And what the National Planning Policy Framework says that in that situation, you need a flood risk assessment to say that the occupants of the building would be safe if there was a flood, as per predicted. So what the applicants have done throughout the course of this application, they did submit a flood risk assessment, which came before members in December 2024. At that point, flood risk assessment was considered by the Environment Agency to be inadequate. Hence, there was a recommendation for refusal, along with the other reasons. Committee wanted to give the applicant another opportunity to redo that flood risk assessment. They've done that. They've improved it along with the other information that's been submitted. So it's gone back to the Environment Agency, and they've now said flood risk assessment we're happy with. So essentially, in policy terms, we've got a green tick now, because the flood risk assessment demonstrates that the people who would be living on site would be safe in the event of a flood. So it might be difficult to understand, but that is the national planning approach to flooding in this type of scenario. So hopefully that answers the question from a policy perspective, at least, even if you may not fully agree with it.
Thank you, Ed. Councillor Boyden. Oh, sorry, Rob. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I think we can all agree it's bonkers to build on a floodplain, but I mean, it's the Environment Agency's job to tell us whether it's safe or not, and they say it's fine. So whether we agree with this or not, I don't think we can argue with it. Couple of small points I've got here. Somerset Waste Partnership got concerns about roadside collection and storage. Can you comment on that, please? And also, I've had a comment from a resident about rights of way, and in particular, bridle path. And can you tell us whether they will be safe and sound and all the rest of it? Thank you very much.
So with regarding the waste would have to be taken up to the highway unless a specific arrangement is made, and the access is wide. It also serves existing dwellings, and so it's considered acceptable. And did you say the safety of the people using the? Will you protect the right of way, rights of way? So the site doesn't actually. It's the access to the site that the right of way crosses, and so yeah, that there's no development or change there.
Sorry, I was looking at something else. I think who was wanting to speak? I think you, and then Martin.
The reason I deferred is that I was going to do what I did last time, just make a proposal, and I didn't want to, preempt what anybody else might say. But so I think I'll do it now. If Adam wants to add to that or contradict it, I don't mind. I'm being a bit cynical here. I think if we really want to put together a sort of 100-year plan to mitigate against flooding, we'd need to build an ark. I don't think that's really possible. We've deferred this. We asked the applicant to go back and find a resolution. They seem to have done that. The office has worked on it, has found a resolution. Around the table, we might have our reservations about how effective that will be. But I think, given the application, I think we have to approve.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to speak on this, or shall we take this as a proposal? You're happy to second it? Yeah, thank you. Right, we have a proposal in front of us, seconded by Councillor Reid. I have one more speaker, and then we will go to a vote.
I just looking at the report about the Environment Agency generally resisting single-storey residential dwellings as they're not appropriate in flood zone 3, as there's no upper storey to provide a refuge space, and most of these existing dwellings are single stories. So the people, in the event of a flood, will either go outside somewhere else, or go to one of their neighbours that has an upper storey perhaps, or get wet in their flooded homes potentially, if they're not protected in the detail that they could be designed out potentially. So are we really happy with that? Is there any local lead flood authority response that could have been obtained on this? I understand the principle. It's a redevelopment, it's a change of use, it's not new development, but not new buildings. But are we not concerned about the single storey in the flood zone 3? Thanks.
Can I come? Thank you, Chair. So I'll just read what the Environment Agency said in their second response relating to the single storey. Although there are ground floor sleeping arrangements, section 3.4 of the hydraulic modelling study by JBA Appendix G, reference blah, 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 demonstrates that the flood hazard rating for most of the site is low, and the safest place for residents is to remain in their properties in the event of a flood.
That's stay-at-home policy, right? Okay, we can't answer that, can we? No.
So we have a proposal in front of us to approve the application, seconded by Councillor Dimmery, seconded by Councillor Reid. I would like to take it to the vote then. All those in favour of the proposal? And all those against? 2, 3, 4.
Have we asked for who is against the proposal?
Yes, we have. There was 1, 2, 3 against, and Councillor Dunk is 4, and there were 4 proposed. You're abstaining. Okay, so there's 3 against, 4 for. So on that basis, the proposal has been accepted. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone. And we can all think what we think about flooding. Yes, go on.
So may I just ask a conceptual question? Who now has liability should that place flood to deal with the damage? Does Somerset now have a liability to look after these people?
Simon saying that.
The council's made the decision, I know.
It does have consequences. Okay, thank you for that. Shall we move on fairly promptly now to the final item on the agenda, item 7, and that's the appeals report. And I don't know whether, Simon, you want to take us through this? I think some of them are fairly self-evident, but one of them we need to have a discussion on.
Yeah, So you've got in the report pack, members, both the set of conditions which the inspector has granted planning permission subject to, and the consideration that was given to the requirements of the habitat regulations. I'm drawing that to your attention because if you look at the 45 conditions, so permission was granted subject to 45 conditions plus a whole raft of obligations that are included in the Section 106 agreement. In terms of the conditions, there are a high number which are in relation to securing acceptable mitigation for the ecological interests that would be affected by the development. So I think that's a really, really positive thing for us as the local authority to note. I think the other issues which you certainly Councillor Boyden will be aware of, the other members might not be aware of. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dimmer as well, you'll be aware of it. In Frome and the surrounding area, there is a policy requirement for any new development to contribute towards improvement on the A361, the two identified roundabouts. And you'll see at condition 35, there's a trigger on the amount of development, both residential and commercial, that can take place before those improvements are done. So again, that's a positive aspect of the decision that's been issued. And then probably the only other one that I think I was going to highlight is condition 45. There's a requirement to provide a bridge over the River Frome to deliver an active travel corridor, which is, if you like, a requirement for the industrial development that is proposed towards the southern part of the development area, so that again there are alternative options for people who are going to work there to access the employment space without having to go in their private car. So again, there are a lot of conditions, and I probably would say for this meeting, that's all I wanted to particularly highlight. Very happy to sit down with any of you in a group or you know, on a one-to-one, two-to-one basis, just to go through any of the conditions that you're not clear about.
Adam.
Malcolm.
I was just going to say thank you for that. You know, we can't pretend the Frome councillors in this room, and Barry's Nick close enough to that, can pretend we're delighted with the inspector's decision on this. But the more conditions that we can get in to help mitigate things, especially on the Frome bypass, that's certainly welcome. The bridge over the river is certainly welcome. And I'd add to that access to there's a public bridleway. I think it's public footpath or cycle path where people have to cross the road that bypass for its continuation. If we can get something planned for that as well, then I think we'd be happy. We just have to make the best of it. But thank you for that.
And can I just add in a question? As in, there's 45 odd conditions, I think, and there's dozens of clauses of Section 106 agreement requiring triggers and investigations and plans and submissions galore. How can our council team cope with all that? Is it funded? Is this going to be funded? Is time going to be funded by the development? Is there going to be some sort of working group? Because I know you do a lot of work on these conditions on developments that have been approved at committee or otherwise, behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see. Is it going to be resourced enough? And will things come to committee as well? The reserved matters phased applications still as well?
I mean, again, just on the procedural issue, obviously we've got a scheme of delegation at the moment, and obviously any applications that are submitted will be determined in accordance with the scheme of delegation. That might change, and that might have an impact on the number of applications at the reserve matter stage that come forward to the committee. So again, that's probably all I can say at the moment. In terms of can we resource it, how are we going to resource it? We will resource it. We haven't had a discussion yet how we will, but we will resource it because it's a really important development for Frome, and we need to make sure that the controls checks that are included as part of the decision are followed.
If I just come back on that, locally, obviously, there's going to be a big impact on Frome, certainly the southern end of the town as it gets built out. Is there some sort of proposed liaison forum with the town council and the residents and so on as well as it goes forward?
Yeah, I mean, I know the town council obviously were very vociferous in their discussions with the applicant at the time. I think what we've got to remember is what we've got now is a planning permission for a large area of land, which probably will be developed on a plot by plot basis. So, now there'll certainly be some conditions that the current, if you like, the landowner team will have to seek to discharge. But a lot of the reserved matters applications will be submitted by by builders who are actually going to build the properties. But again, there's no reason to think that line of communication between the town council and any plot developer will not continue. It normally does continue. There's a considerate contractors national policy requirement, so I'm sure it will.
I suppose, are there any?
Do you want to say anything further? Sorry, I thought you were. Okay, fine. Any other thoughts, Barry?
Simon, when they're going to develop this land, somebody said it's going to be developed 170 houses a year. So you've got 10 years and possibly at least 10 potential different developers. How are you going to make them stick to the master plan that was produced that is going to reproduce the look of Frome, for want of better words? How are you going to make them all stick to it? Because they're not all going to want to do it, that's for sure.
I think if we look at the conditions, there are some requirements that effectively require them to comply with the material that was submitted to support the application in terms of the building heights, the density, the various land uses. And so that actually, so condition 2 does provide quite a lot of clarification as to what would be expected with regards to developing on the site. In terms of the actual design, condition 5 requires them to, is it condition 5? Sorry, condition 6 requires them to effectively submit with their reserve matters a detailed design code for that phase of development, and that design code will be assessed by us, but more importantly it'll tie back to what's been approved at the outline stage in the material that was submitted.
But with the indicative plan, Simon, there was talk about mirroring the appearance of the Bartons in Frome.
Yeah, I mean the obviously what we had Councillor Clark at the outline stage was a master plan which again demonstrated to the decision maker that the site could accommodate that quantum of development. What we've got to do now, when the plot by plot submissions are made to us, is make sure that the design's acceptable. And we've got a framework in our own development plan policies, but we've got the additional framework provided by the conditions.
There's a long way from making a house look like something that's built in the Bartons to the boxes that they want to chuck up as fast as they can, isn't there? And I mean, it comes down to you to make sure that they don't chuck them up as fast as they can.
It will come down to the local planning authority to make a decision as to whether or not the proposals are acceptable. Yeah, it will.
Sorry, one more. Who will enforce the conditions, Simon?
Who will enforce the conditions? As with all the conditions on all the decisions which the council issues, it will be down to the council to make the necessary arrangements that any conditions that need to be monitored are monitored.
Some conditions appear to be quite minor. I've got about half a dozen at the moment I've got emails about, and they're piddly little things really. People are living in houses before they've completed pre-occupation conditions. Well, somebody should be saying, you can't go in there and don't do it. But it's very hard to find anybody who's willing to take it on, Simon.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, and that's obviously an issue that the council needs to resolve in terms of how it's going to enforce the decisions, the issues on planning applications.
Okay, any other thoughts about any of the applications? I just wondered if on the Mulberry Cottage one, which on face value what the inspector is saying is fairly straightforward, and I was curious why we had objected to that, or the conservation officer had. What was the background to that? That seemed to be a fairly straightforward 1970s door and a fireplace, etc. What was precious about them?
My reading of it was just a simple disagreement, a difference of professional opinion, that the conservationer felt that those elements of that building should be preserved. So the inspector has allowed that listed building consent application on the basis that it wouldn't result in loss to any historic fabric. A disagreement. So it's a delegated decision. So one that we can take back with the the conservation officer, just to.
Do the conservation officers have the same challenge as an ordinary planning officer when they do their report? Does somebody go through it with them and challenge it?
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's a recommendation and then a review and sign off. So that all goes through. With everything, it's a balance, and people are putting forward what their professional view is, and officers are making forward recommendations for refusal. On the assumption that they feel like they have a strong case to hold. The appeal. Did you want me to go through the other two little appeals while I?
I don't have any questions on the other appeals. Does anyone else? No. Unless you think there's something we should learn from it.
No, I mean, they were both relatively small ones. They were both delegated, and the inspectors upheld the officer decisions. So not really any particular learning points on those.
Good. Okay, Ben, on that basis, I'm very happy to call the meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm sorry, Ewan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, please, under any other business, and a couple of other colleagues have alluded to it. We've only got one enforcement officer in these, and that's poor old Trevor.
Yep.
And he's quickly getting burnt out. And he's told me he's got in excess of 400 backlog cases. Is there a way that we can formally represent to HR to get our enforcement officers recruited? Because this is not sustainable. I'm getting lots of emails from various constituents basically complaining, and they're just being put on hold. Not because of Trevor's not doing a wonderful job. He's doing a wonderful job, but we just don't have the capacity.
Well, I think the only thing we can do is raise the issue with Mike Rigby at an associates meeting and just say that, we need to do something. But HR are fairly adamant that they have to move things forward. I know that there's been some delay because the unions have disagreed with some process, which has been discussed. And I think that the recognition is that we just need to get our very basic HR for salary scales correct, job descriptions, and it's planning and just about engineers, technical people, you name it, across the council. They're all on. I think it's nearly 1,000 of our staff are on market supplements at the moment. Think about it. 1/4 of our staff. Something has to be done. We recognise that. Sorry, Nikki, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, councillors, for your support. It's something that is recognised amongst officers, and there is, senior level discussion, senior councillor discussion, particularly with the enforcement side. So there is work being undertaken to review the workload and what's needed. There is a new person looking to start in the East enforcement team. So it is growing. Obviously, we need to establish more capacity, and work is going, and it has been identified as a priority. We appreciate there's officer support and member support to do that, as
Talking
it's
to
coming.
other councils, and this is just hearsay, but I think it's quite valid, is that they have slightly a different person spec, and they're looking for people ex-police, ex-military, who given with the appropriate abilities to actually take on, specific planning related knowledge and understanding. And therefore, it means that they have a much wider pool of people to recruit from. And maybe we need to think out of the box a bit on recruitment. But I'm sure you've made that point. Anyway, on that basis, unless there's any other business, I'm sorry, I haven't got a direct answer for you, Ewan, but there's the direction of travel. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone, and thank you for the people who have been online all afternoon. And hopefully we'll see you all in a month's time. Thank you very much indeed.